Live.
Terrific. Okay, this is a regular meeting of the Fairhaven Zoning Board of Adjustment. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. At the time of the board reorganization in January of this year, the board adopted its regular meeting schedule for the year. Notice of the schedule was sent to and published in the Asbury Park Press and was also sent to the Two River Times and the Star Ledger. That notice was also posted on the bulletin board in the Borough Hall and has remained continuously posted there as required by the statute. A copy of the notice is and has been available to the public and is on file with the Office of the Borough Clerk. A copy of the notice has also been sent to such members of the public as have requested such information in accordance with the statute. Adequate notice having been given, the board secretary is directed to include this statement in the minutes of the meeting. Michael, any requirement relating to the nature of our meeting via Zoom tonight?
Mr. Chairman, we should also indicate that as a result of the COVID pandemic, when the board found it necessary to conduct its hearings remotely via Zoom platform, we issued supplemental Open Public Meetings Act notices in the usual course. We sent to the two newspapers, posted at Borough Hall, delivered to the Borough Clerk, and posted on the Borough website the manner in which the meetings would be conducted remotely, giving interested parties information as to how they could join the meetings that are being conducted remotely, and also advising interested parties that if they have any difficulties in joining the meetings or have any questions, that they could contact our board secretary, and we provided both a telephone number and email. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Irene. Have a roll call, please, Jen.
Ms. Chesney,
Here.
Ms. Quigley,
Here.
Mr. Ridgway, Mr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Ludman,
Here.
Dr. Laufer,
Here.
Mr. Kinsella,
Here.
Mrs. Neff,
Here.
Mr. Leader.
Yes, here. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of matters on the agenda this evening. The first matter that the board is going to hear is a continuation of the Bruiser Woods matter. The next matter the board's going to hear is the Guerrero matter, 8 Henderson Place. And the third matter on the agenda this evening, which we hope to reach, is 81 Riverlawn Drive, Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, we should indicate for the record that Mr. Ludman is recusing himself with regard to the Bruiser Wood matter. So can we demote him at this point, Jennifer?
Okay, so with Mr. Ludman gone, before we call the applicant to the pretend dais here, what do we have with regard to voting, given that Mr. Ridgway has not yet appeared? We just need to confirm that I'd like to understand whether we have a full 7. We would draw in alternates, and we have to have people that were here at the last meeting.
So is there anyone present this evening who was not present, any board member present this evening who was not present at the prior hearing on the Bruiser Woods matter?
Mike, you broke up a little bit and then you went right to mute.
So the question was, is there any board member present this evening who was not present when we conducted the first part of the Bruiser Woods hearing last month? So all board members were present?
Yes.
All right, then we have 7. So without Mr. Ridgway and without Adam, we have 7 and we're okay. We're good to go. So let's call up the applicant, please, on Bruiser Woods.
Okay, I'll start moving them over.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Good evening, Mr. Brodsky. We have Mr. Victor. I always, Fisher. Jason, how do you pronounce it? I always pronounce it wrong. You pronounce that C like an S?
Fichter.
Fisher. Mr. Condorus is here. I see that Ms. Barry is here and you're here, Mr. Brodsky. Is there anybody else in your team?
That's all we have.
Very good. All right. Do we have any administrative details regarding notice? We waive the obligation to renotice, I believe. Do we have anything, Mr. Irene, any administrative cleanup?
I don't know why I keep losing video here, Mr. Chairman, but in any event, just as a housekeeping matter, we're going to swear in our professional planner, Ms. Gable. If you'd raise your right hand. You do swear in testimony, you give the board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And I believe we had Mr. Kennedy here a moment ago. Do we still have Mr. Kennedy?
Do.
Yes, I'm here, Mike.
Okay, Jim, we're going to swear you in also. You do swear in testimony, you give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Brodsky, then why don't we go to you? You can set the stage for us, where we were, where we're going, what's new tonight.
Of course. Good evening, board members. Rick Brodsky on behalf of the applicant, Bruiser Woods LLC, AKA Kick Dance Studio. When we concluded the hearing last month, we had some back and forth between the board and also from our professionals, and we got a lot of excellent input and insights from board members, and a lot of it focused on the second story addition being set back from the front property line and from the existing first floor. So we went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and our architect Tony Condorus did an excellent job, and we think that the product that we came up with is one that incorporates those requests and at the same time maintains the functionality of the building for the applicant's use. So essentially, as you'll hear, Tony will walk the board through the revised plans. The proposed second floor addition will be set back about 9 feet from the first floor, from the existing first floor, and will sort of shifted back, kind of cantilevered, therefore in the back, which accomplished another suggestion that a couple of board members had made with regard to having sort of a covered entry in that rear portion of the building. So it worked very nicely. We also so in addition to Tony, we have Jason Fichter as well, who also met with or spoke with Jim Kennedy with regard to the revised plans. Jim had a few comments that Jason is agreeable to, and we're good to go on that. So setting back that second floor, improve the streetscape, improve the aesthetics, and actually even aided in some of the functionality of the building. In addition, there were some other revisions that were made to the plan, which again incorporated comments from the board, including the installation of a light pole to help with the lighting in the parking area, so I think you're going to like it. So unless the board has any questions, what I'd like to do is have Tony just walk the board through those revised plans right off the bat.
And we're going to swear in Mr. Condorus, but before we do that, we want the record to reflect that Mr. Ridgway has joined the board. Mr. Condorus, if you'd raise your right hand. You do swear in testimony, give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
Tony.
Brodsky, do you want to mark the plan before he begins to testify, the new
Yeah,
plan?
let's do that, Mike. I think we're at A6.
Does that conform to your notes, Jen? Do you have that? And I think you're muted, Jen.
Yes, that's correct. A6.
A6. What do you have as A5?
The color enhancement sheet C300 dated 11/12/20.
And that's what I have.
by Insight Engineering.
Okay, so we had the floor plans and elevations prepared by Anthony Condoris, registered architect, consisting of 2 sheets dated January 22, 2020, revised through November 17, 2020. Right, Mr. Condoris?
That's correct. That's the last revision date is the 17th.
Okay, so that'll be A6. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Tony, if you would, just walk the board through focusing on the nature of the revisions.
Okay, should I share my screen from this end?
That'd
For
be
my
great.
drawings? Are you, okay. I'm gonna go right to the, my exhibit here, which is if that's okay, which is a 3-dimensional drawing.
All right, Mike, we'll need
Is that
to,
okay?
we'll need to mark that one as A7.
So if you're ready, I'll get started
Yeah, if
here.
you pull it in and then describe for the record, Tony, what it is, we'll have it marked as A7.
Sure. Can you see that coming up there?
It's on its way.
Okay, that's not the right one though. That's the old one. I was going to use that for comparison. Can you see this one? No? Okay.
Still the old one.
Only the old one. Okay, hold on. Sorry.
There we go.
It's here? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, this is a 3D rendering which I revised compared to the old one. The most significant thing we did was we set the front of the building back on the second floor 9 feet. And we chose the 9-foot number because that would only eliminate 1 parking space in the rear. Going by the board's suggestions, they felt that taking into consideration what they said last time, that it might be worth losing a space to help fix the facade. So what we've done here is we set the building back, we put a balcony on the top, and also removed the parapet completely. So we have a hip roof that's actually sloping back from this point, which further reduces the visual impact of this building on the street. I do have an interesting picture here. It's the building kind of dropped into the context. I can show you that. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. So we just took our rendering and kind of dropped it into the context. It's not perfectly to scale, but it gives a good idea of how the building's going to look. And it also shows how it's set back off the street, which is, I think, definitely a good thing.
Looks good.
So if I go back to this, I'll swing you around to the back.
Yeah, let's see the rear, Tony.
Yeah, I'm going to swing you around. So this is the 9-foot offset that we created. And the way we were able to do that without impacting the inside studio space was to turn the.
Hold on, Tony, we still have your streetscape perspective.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Okay, hold on.
There we go.
Okay. So this is the rear. And right here, you can see the 9-foot offset. We were able to install a column, which greatly reduced the structural burden on the building and on the owner. So it's a relatively easy thing to achieve structurally because I was able to put this column in. And of course, the best thing is it created this overhang, which is a great way to enter the building. So that's swinging around. Now, there's something here that I'd show you that was not on the submittal because after seeing the review letter from the planner, there were some questions about where we would put the utilities. So I had a conversation with the builder this morning, and he said, I suggested actually that maybe we would put a flat roof on top of the stairwell with a parapet, a small parapet, that would actually hide the AC units. So I think that's it's a pretty good way to conceal the mechanicals. Can't really see them from anywhere. Coming around. So We're still going to maintain this canopy mounted sign. It's the same sign that's there now, and it's the same sign that's mounted on the canopy now. So that's not changing, even though it's a variance. There were some other comments about, on the drawings that we submitted, we had this canopy roof wrapping around the side partially. There was some concern about that being an obstruction to vehicles, so we chopped off the side of that canopy, and it's flush with the side of the building now. This emergency door is going to stay, but it will be marked as an emergency door. It will only be used in emergencies.
And Tony, was there anything in the planner's letter that you needed to address? I know there was a question with regard to reception.
Yes. 1 second, please. To pull up my CAD files. Yeah. Are you able to see the PDF files here on my screen?
No.
No. Okay, hold on. Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there was a comment on the planners, a couple comments actually that I'll get to, but that I showed 2 reception areas here. This was mislabeled. I don't know how that got on there, but because we did at one point have a reception area in the front, but the main entrance is definitely going to be in the rear, and it's going to be the main entrance, and this front entrance is going to be secondary, so it's not going to be a reception area. The reception area will be in the rear. So I just wanted to clarify that. There was another question or comment on the planner's letter about the parapet wall. Some of these drawings are a little deceiving. This 3-dimensional drawing that I put on my cover sheet almost makes this roof look like it's flat. That's not the case. It will look the way it looks on the rendering, which is the hip roof. So it's a very simple roof, not a particularly expensive roof, which is great. So, but it has a nice look, and it keeps the front of the building toned down.
Great. Questions for Mr. Kondoris?
Mr. Condors, did you reconfigure the direction of the rear stairway?
Yes, I did. Yes, I rotated them 90 degrees, which allowed me to keep this area wider than it was before, so I could take the whole studio and push it back, which made this offset a lot more feasible from a space standpoint. So the stairs, and that's why we had to remove 1 parking space, because the stairway had to rotate.
And the cantilever, what's the size of the cantilever of the second floor?
It's 9 feet. It's equivalent to the setback that we took off the front. So basically the second floor just slid back 9 feet.
So does your square footage stay exactly the same on the new design from the old design?
I think it got a little bigger by a few square feet just because of the configuration.
Okay. If you lost a parking space, was there any way to figure out how to do something about a K-turn area?
I guess that would be a question for...
Yeah, Todd, there is. Jason will hit that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Can you hear me? I had a question.
Yes.
The plan shows 1 door. The existing plan that's up now shows 1 door. Yet I saw somewhere that it talked about 2 doors on the side by the driveway. Would you just confirm that there's 1 door and not 2 doors?
It's only 1 door. It's only 1 door. Yeah.
And would you also confirm that there's no handle on the outside of that door, that it's strictly an egress door?
There won't be a handle. This is a generic door that we have in our program, so it would not have a handle. It would probably have a latch on the inside.
Thank you.
Mr. Condorus, what's that bump out in between the emergency door and that window?
That's an old structural pilaster that's on the building now. And so it'd probably be best to leave it.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask just one question?
Yep, please, Mr. Kennedy.
Tony, when you go back to the rear view, and this is something I sort of floated by with Jason, is there a possible way of providing some storage under the mid landing and providing a door there to provide just some refuse or just to give you a little bit more room outside? Can you store things under the mid landing?
Well, the reason I would not want to do that is a fire rated stairway. And if I don't keep the continuity of the walls, I have to start fire rating the underside and around it. And so that whole refuse area would have to be fire rated. I suppose it could be done, but it's not ideal.
Okay, that's a good answer then.
Okay.
So the cans are actually, they're shown there as a footprint, right? Is there,
That might be a carryover from the old site plan, actually, but they could go.
I'm just wondering if there's any need to do anything to, just kind of make all that look tight, even if you put it at, further extend it. Does that interfere with, if you did an awning or a fenced area there?
It could be okay, but I think I'd rather have Jason, I'd defer to him for that.
We should talk, look, I'm only asking to the extent that any variance relief is required in order to do something to make it tight.
Are you suggesting possibly putting like a little fenced in area over here?
I don't know where the cans are going to go, but if you're going to direct your traffic all through the rear, I just think you want it to look buttoned up. It looks great.
We could put what we could put here probably is a little section of fence that would hide the cans.
Mm-hmm.
There is going to be some new landscaping over here, I believe. So between the fence and the landscaping, we could hide the cans.
We actually don't, I don't know if I could speak yet. Should I, I'm going to wait.
Well, Mr. Chairman, why don't we just swear him in and we'll go from there?
Sure.
Ms. Fisher, raise your right hand. You do swear testimony this board to be true, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. So what I was saying is on the rendering that's on the screen right now, what's not shown is, call it the rightmost wall of the stairwell there. We actually have green space coming in on the back wall a little bit, pretty close to where that first can is. Or put it this way, right along the back line of the parking. If you extend that straight across, yes. That's all grass, and there's some evergreens we're proposing in there. So that's why they're shown where they are.
I see.
Mr. Condouris, does the second floor line up, now that it's been pushed back, does it line up with the other buildings or the other facades at the adjacent buildings to this one?
It's a lot closer. You can see this is the footprint of the building next door. So it's just about lined up, yeah, for the most part.
How did we determine, I know, so last time we had talked about, what it might be. We talked about what the affordable housing overlays were going to require. And Tony, you said you lost a parking space. How did you find the balance between, setting it back and providing that relief and not going too far?
Well, it was definitely based on the width of a standard parking space because of the original parking plan was basically fitting right into where the building is. So if I were to push the building 9 feet back, we would only lose 1 parking space. If I pushed it 10 feet back, then we'd be compromising another parking space. So I sort of set my limits at 9 feet. And I felt that was a pretty good offset for the front.
It's exactly what I wanted to understand. So if you were to move it back any further, you'd lose an entire parking space.
Go into the second space.
Correct. Yeah.
But couldn't you move the facade back, the front facade back, and still leave the 9-foot cantilever in the back. In other words, you would just be decreasing the square footage of that front studio.
Well, one of the things we were trying to do was maintain the square footage that we had in the original design. And that was based on from a function standpoint. You know, she's the owner wants to have ample space in her studio. So we were trying to preserve what we had designed and hopefully be a little more sympathetic to what the board wanted.
Mr. Gondouris, tell me about the front awning. I think last time we had spoken about exactly where it was relative to the property boundary. I thought we determined that that thing's over by close to a foot. Did we do measurements? Did we do anything to try and bring that back and incorporate that into the facade?
Well, we were hoping to preserve what's there, but there is a potential for us to not be able to keep it. If we did remove it, we would make it conform. If we had to remove it and rebuild it, we would make it conform to as best we could to the property line.
But Tony, that's a cost issue, right? And we'd like to avoid that.
That's correct.
Since frankly, Vanessa is now way over budget with these revisions, and every dollar counts. I know that's not necessarily the board's, within the board's purview, but it is a reality check for us.
Does it encroach into the right of way?
I don't know, Jason, does it?
I'm sorry, did you hear me there? I was muted.
No.
No.
Yeah, I was saying it encroaches ever so slightly. I'm going to try and get a measurement for you, but let's.
Jason, you're muted again.
I'll come back to you. I'll take a quick measurement, see if I can get it.
So, Mr. Brodsky, what you're explaining is that the intent is to reuse the awning that's there. And I think that I heard also that to the extent that that was not possible and it had to be reconstructed, that it would be reconstructed within the property boundary.
Yes. That's correct.
Mr. Gondouris, what's the final ridge height at the top of your roof line there?
It's right at 30 feet, pretty much, just about 30 feet, a little bit under 30 feet, plus or minus.
That awning is approximately 6 inches over.
Right. I'll also point out, just for that, the awning is, it's a good, not the awning, excuse me, the ridge, the highest point of the ridge is about, 25 feet off of the front of the building. So I think that's another benefit of using this hip roof instead of the parapet.
Mr. Brodsky, what variances are triggered by the application as it stands tonight?
We have the same variances. We still have our FAR variance of 0.45, where 0.4 is proposed, and we have, and the parking deficiency now is decreased by 1 space. So those were the two major variances. Jason, were any of the others removed by virtue of the revisions?
Not removed, but reduced. For example, the front yard, increasing the volume on the second floor, that's been reduced. Same for the side yard. That might be it that changed.
Yeah, you need 2 side yards and a front yard, right? You're exacerbating in all 3 directions, correct?
I believe the total side we're good, but the one side is the one we need. Yeah.
And front yard.
Front, correct.
Yeah. Jason, you want to walk us through the issues of the site plan? I know you've got some lighting changes.
But before you do that, Mr. Fitzgerald, can we just touch back on for a moment the FAR? Because Mr. Brodsky referenced 45%, which is what I think we had originally. But my notes from last meeting show that there was some recalculation of that to 43.5%.
Yeah, you're correct. So
Right, right.
at the last hearing, I actually gave a discussion on this at the last hearing. I believe it was submitted at 0.45, but we did some math ahead of the hearing. This was the difference of the square footage between the architect and the surveyor, and we resolved that. And when we corrected the math, the FAR we came to you last time with was 0.435 or 0.44. And tonight we're here for 0.45 again, or 0.4481 if you want to carry it out.
That's because that's because the revision adds about 122 square feet, correct?
Something like that, yeah. And that's related to the reconfiguring of the stairwell, I believe. That's all it is.
Right.
Okay, so we're back to 45% then.
Yeah.
0.45, that's correct.
Mr.
Thank you.
Condoris, I bought it when you said a few feet, but 100 sounds more substantial. Can we go into the floor plan and can you show us where that is?
Sure. Let me. Unfortunately, I don't have anything graphically where I can illustrate where it came from. But this stairway was smaller originally, because when we reconfigured it, we found that we had to add a few more risers and it stretched out a little bit. So the stairwell did get bigger. And whatever happened on the floor plan, when we cantilevered it, we picked up a few square feet there. I'm sorry for not being able to give you a better explanation, but the building footprint, the original building footprint obviously is the same. And we did just shift it back 9 feet. So the volume really comes from the stairwell.
And the changes to the stairs relate to the reconfiguration, or was there a miscalculation as to the amount of risers originally?
It's both. We looked into it again and we took some measurements. We realized that we had a few more steps to go up. So we had to stretch it out a little bit.
Okay. And Mr. Brodsky, with regard to the parking variance, how many spaces are required by this application? And I know we just lost one, so I lost track of how many you were short to begin with.
So 21 is required by the ordinance. 15 exists today, and we're now at 12.
I'm sorry, 21's required, 15 exists today, and it comes down to 12 because you lost it.
Right, it went from, that's correct. We originally submitted at 13, and now with the revised plan, we're at 12.
And you lost the other two because of the handicap spot?
No, we lost the other two because the parking that was out there, or I should say the parking that's out there today is non-compliant. It doesn't work. This goes back to the early conversations Jim Kennedy and I had. We changed the parking arrangement around to be 90 degree with a compliant aisle behind it.
Right.
And when you do that, we maxed out at 13. And we testified last month. You'll recall that the applicant said the very maximum parking demand she's going to need is 10. And that might be once a week. That's the mommy and me class. So there was discussions about doing this, pushing back the second floor, cantilevering, even if it meant losing a space. So that's what brought us down from 13 to 12.
And the requirement of 21, Mr. Brodsky, is that based on a particular use? Are there other uses with the same square footage that would require more parking?
Jason, I'm going to ask Jason to address that. I don't recall that.
If I recall correctly, that would be true. For example, if I'd have to look, but if a medical use was permitted here, it would probably have a higher parking demand. This is 1 per 200. That's pretty. That's a big number. So
21 is 1 per 200.
I'm sorry.
21 is 1 per 200.
Correct.
It's based on the gross square footage.
That's right.
I don't think we have a medical zone, and I don't think we have medical parking.
And if you did, I'm not sure it would be higher than 1 per 200 anyway.
Yeah, five's a little more
5
than
per thousand is on the high end.
Yeah.
25% higher than 4 per. Okay. All right, Jason, you want to walk us around the revised site plan?
Sure. There's not much to discuss, so I can keep it brief for you, but we prepared a revised exhibit. I'm not sure if it was submitted. I can pull it up on my screen if you like. Let me do that.
Please do. I think we got it yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay.
And while you're pulling that up, that's the preliminary and final site plan prepared by Jason L. Fitcher, PE and PP Insight Engineering LLC. 3 sheets, March 6, 2020, revised through November 16, 2020, Ms. Fitcher?
That is the site plan that was submitted. This is a rendering. Do you guys see the rendering up there?
We do.
Great. So it follows the same dates, Mike. Originally dated 11/12/20, first revision 12/3/20.
All right, so we're going to mark the site plan that was submitted as Exhibit A-9, and Exhibit A-10 will be the color enhanced rendering of the site plan.
Yeah, so in terms of the site, Tony talked about the building, and I'll bring you in here to the back of the building. You can see where the overhang is. It's got the hatch in there, right? So now the entry into the back is under that overhang, and then the stairwell is over on the left side here. These are the refuse cans that we talked about earlier, and the landscape and evergreens that we talked about. I think it was you, Mr. Chairman, that asked earlier about having a turnaround. That's actually one thing that Jim Kennedy commented to me ahead of the hearing, changing this ADA parking configuration from 5 and 11 to 8 and 8, which is another way of doing it. And having an 8-foot hatched out aisle here would provide a car the space to make a turn and exit. So that would solve that problem. And then the light, let me zoom out a little bit so you can get a perspective.
I'm sorry, Jason. Let's just go back and nail that issue. So you've got an 11 plus a 5.
Yep, that's 16.
And so you're proposing to modify that to have a crosshatched area of 8?
Correct, 8 and 8, still 16.
So if you were to do that, does the crosshatched area need to be closer to the building, or is it
No,
on the other
no,
side?
the 11-foot wide parking space becomes 8 feet wide.
So
This line stays where it is.
So as a practical matter, right, if we're talking about that being a space for somebody to do a K-turn into, the closer it is to the rear of the building where kids might be, the less likely it is to be used. Could the crosshatched area be flipped to the north side with the parking space closer so that the K-turn is further away from the building?
I suppose it could. Sure, I think it's more functional where it is, but I don't believe there's anything saying we can't put it on the other side.
What does that do to the guy trying to exit the car and the handicap ramp with the cans there?
Well, the cans aren't in the way because the 11 and the 5, the 16-foot wide handicap space altogether here is what's needed for the vehicle plus the maneuvering. So the cans are not a conflict.
But if you flip them, won't the door be adjacent to the cans?
Yeah, I don't see a conflict with that. You've got a little bit of space in here between the cans and the parking space, and they're movable.
Let's get the benefit of Mr. Kennedy's insight. I'm not trying to design the parking. That's not my expertise. I'm trying to make sure that if a K-turn is something that could be required, that it be done in the safest way and that it really be usable. Jim, you have any thoughts?
Well, I guess I agree with the way it's designed, because generally, if someone needs a wheelchair accessible van, it would be on the driver's side typically, but the ADA permits 2 stalls to share 1 loading area. So that means the loading area could be on the right or left of the vehicle. It doesn't matter. And a very practical thing is, if your ramp is on the passenger side, you're going to pull into the striped area. So I think there's plenty of room. The kids, you do have a 9-foot overhang, plus the remaining length of the stair tower. I think the garbage cans are probably not going to wind up there after Mrs. Berry is going to spend so much money to make this so beautiful. I have a feeling they're going to find themselves somewhere else. And having an 8 and 8 stall, I think solves a lot of issues. With the dance studio, I'm not going to say that the ADA parking stall wouldn't be used, because it certainly could. But having the 8 closest to the building is more customary. And I think it's a better alternative. I don't see that as a conflict with children that would be under the overhang. And there's plenty of visibility for a car that's coming down towards the building, and for people leaving the building to see a car turning. So both the pedestrian and the vehicle driver would have visibility to avoid that kind of a conflict. It's lit, it's well lit. There's a building mounted light right there. So I would prefer to not have the car turning between the possibly 2 cars. I would prefer them to be on the building side of the parked car.
So you think, so 8 and 8, 8-foot space, 8-foot crosshatched closer to the building.
Yes.
That's great, Jim. Thank you.
All right. Really, the only other thing we're dealing with here is that we added a light, and that's by way of a light pole. So that is shown right here. And in the plans that were submitted, we show that it does cast light. You'll recall from the last hearing, the only light we were proposing in the back was the building mounted light, which casts light roughly halfway down the parking lot, maybe a little bit more. So we proposed this light pole here, which finishes up casting light throughout the parking area. And it also functions to provide light at the driveway, which is an important thing in lighting design, because that's where vehicular conflicts can occur. And it gives us a little bit of light out into the street, but does not spill over into the properties across the street. And that's pretty much it. I think that's all we got.
Jason, just a comment. Both Elena and I had the same comment, that perhaps the light pole should just be shifted towards the building, that 7 feet or so, and lined up with that stall, lined up with that stripe.
Yep. Yeah, you go ahead.
I think that would be a better alternative.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. I have no problem doing it. That's an easy fix, and the light will still function as designed.
Great.
I also had a comment about whether the light pole in the back could be set on a timer or motion sensor at night to kind of dim, so it's not as bright throughout the evening when no one's in the building.
Yeah, I have to imagine after hours, the intention would be for it to be off because there is some ambient light in the area. It's not going to be pitch dark there, so there wouldn't be any reason to have that light on. So I think that'd be fine.
So Jason, just so we're clear, it'll be on a timer roughly 30 minutes after close of the building. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, roughly 30 minutes. If that works for the applicant, if that's all the time she needs, let's say after closing and whatever cleanup she has, a little bit after that, the timer would be to shut it off.
Great. Okay. So I reviewed the plan. I didn't issue another letter. I was satisfied with the revisions. I had very minor technical comments with Jason that we just discussed. Other than that, I'm satisfied with the site plan.
Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Fisher? Okay, Mr. Brodsky, you have anything else?
Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Unless the board members have any questions. Vanessa Berry is on as well, if the board members have any questions for her. But other than that, you know, we appreciate the board's input, and we did our best to try and incorporate as many of the comments as we could. And turns out we've come up with a really good plan that Vanessa is happy with, and we hope the board is as well.
I'm just curious as to why you added a balcony. Was that a strictly a cosmetic thing, or is there some intended use for that balcony?
It was more of an aesthetic thing, sort of trying to keep in with the, I guess I'd use the word quaintness of the town, and just having a roof, it looked a little stark. So the balcony just seemed like a nicer alternative.
Vanessa, you're not going to have any classes out on the balcony, right?
No, it wouldn't be safe to be dancing on the balcony.
Right.
It does look nice.
I thought it looked very pretty.
Anthony, could you provide some testimony about the material and color of the balcony fence?
Yeah, it's most likely just going to be a white, colonial style, maintenance-free balcony made out of vinyl.
Okay.
There were some comments in the in your letter that it was a 4-foot railing, but it actually only has to be a 42-inch railing.
Okay.
Mr. Kondoris, I think we discussed this, or you mentioned it last meeting. The brick facade is going to be addressed as well, kind of updated.
Yes, we'll clean it up. Yes, the intent is to clean it up if we have to repoint it or patch it or whatever it is.
Okay.
Two questions, Mr. Brodsky. First, the proposal for the sign is that it really remain exactly as it sits today, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And then a fully conforming sign in the rear.
Second question relates to the discussion that we had last month related to a potential deed restriction. There was some discussion amongst the board members. There was not a consistent opinion amongst them with regard to whether or not they thought that would be necessary. Did you have any further discussion with your client? Do you have any further thoughts for us before the board deliberates and discusses that issue?
Well, I mean, nothing has changed. The applicant was adamant in her position that she was agreeable to a deed restriction if the board saw fit to impose that, because it's her intention to operate here for a very long time, and she thought that was a way to show that to the board. And she has no intention of changing the use of the building in the near future.
Thank you. Anything else from the board members before we open to the public? Okay. So are there any members of the public that have any questions or would like to make any statements with regard to this application? Please use your raise hand feature, and Ms. Johnson will bring you onto the screen.
Bringing someone over now. We're on mute. Alicia Winnick.
Yes, hi.
Could you give us your full name, spell your last, although we can see it on the screen, and your
Yes.
address for the record, please?
Yep, it's Alicia Winnick, A-L-I-C-I-A. Last name is Winnick, W-I-N-I-C-K. My address is 63 Lake Avenue in Fairhaven.
And we're going to swear you in. You just swear testimony to this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth. So help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
If you have any comments, you can make them. If you have any questions for the applicant or the applicant's professionals, you can ask them now.
Great. No, I have a comment to make. My name is Alicia Winnick, obviously. I've been a resident of Fairhaven for over 6.5 years, and I've actually known Vanessa for 5 of those years through my daughter's dance and art educations. Through Vanessa's ownership of KIC for the last 20 years, she's contributed to the arts education of the hundreds of Fairhaven's children. She has given them an outlet for expression and provided a safe place for them to grow and explore. She's a pillar in our community.
As evidenced by her existing buildings, Vanessa takes great pride in the appearance of her space and will do the same with this expansion. It will be a beautiful addition to our quaint Fairhaven town. Vanessa has revived her prior plans to accommodate the board's request. She's been willing to work with the board to accomplish what is best for both Fairhaven and Kick. Vanessa and Kick have been an integral part of Fairhaven and its downtown for 2 decades. We cannot afford to lose such a high-quality businesswoman from our town. I, as well as 24 other Fairhaven residents, have signed a petition in support of Vanessa's plans to expand in Fairhaven. We strongly call on the Fairhaven Zoning Board to approve Bruiser Woods LLC's application to add a second floor to its dance studio at 611 River Road in Fairhaven. Thank you.
Ms. Sweeney, just so we're clear, you can certainly testify any way you like, but the board doesn't consider petitions. If there's any other interested parties, they're free to make whatever comments they like as well. Okay.
Understood.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Winnick, Mr. Brodsky?
I have no questions.
Thank you, Ms. Winnick.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Going twice? All right, we'll wrap it up. All right, Mr. Brodsky, anything in closing?
Nothing further that I haven't said already. Again, thank the board for your time and input. We believe we've got, as you've seen from the revised plan, significant improvement over that which was originally submitted. And as you've heard from our planning testimony, we believe that the variances that are sought are justified both from a positive and negative criteria standpoint, and we would ask that the board act favorably on the application.
Thank you, Mr. Brodsky. Discussion?
Yeah. First, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Gondouris on a really nice revision. I think there's a lot of increased functionality. It certainly hit all the points, concerns that I had in the first revision, first draft. I like the balcony. It wasn't something that I would have thought would have looked good up there, but it really does. I don't have a problem. I guess the only one would be the awning, but given that's an existing awning and it's there already, it's been there for, I don't know, at least 10 years, maybe more. I don't think that it's worthwhile to push that issue in that it's in the right of way for 6 inches to redo the whole awning and make it conform. I think the plan looks good as it is. I really do. That's it.
With regard to the awning, it would seem to me that the proffer essentially to try to reuse it, and if it's rebuilt, to bring it back within the property line is a reasonable compromise on that subject. And I do think it's important that we be mindful of the revisions that were made, and we haven't talked about the exact cost, but it's certainly been suggested that there's been expense associated with these revisions. I think that should be taken into account as well.
Yeah, that in mind, I wouldn't push that it needs to be rebuilt, that you can't use what's existing. I would hope that they could reuse the existing.
And maybe I'll just contribute to say that I think the awning looks really nice with the balcony. I think that sloping roof in the front looks very nice. I actually think it looks much prettier than what was presented in the last meeting. The visual difference is very significant. It looks very attractive as a building. I think they did I really congratulate the team for doing such a great job. And so it really decreases the concerns, I think, with the fact that it's so close to the street, but it looks so nice.
I agree with those comments.
I was initially a little concerned about the balcony fence extending the facade, but it looks so good that I'm no longer concerned about that. And I think the fact that the parapet was eliminated and the roof sloped back gives the building a very nice look. I compliment everyone on the redesign and what you've done with this. I continue to be concerned about the parking, especially if this building is sold. Not so much for the present user, but if the building is sold in the future, the parking is going to be an issue. And I really still would like to see something in the deed restriction, restricting it to a use of similar parking volume. I think something like that would be necessary in order to prevent this from having parking that really spills out into the street with future use. But I don't have a problem with it with its present user.
Well, if the use were to change and the parking requirements changed with the change of use, would that necessarily come before the zoning board as a variance, Todd, without a deed restriction?
Not absent some special kind of condition, no, because they're permitted uses.
Well, hold on a second. We have a site plan requirement in Fairhaven that ties to the specific use change. So under the existing ordinances, which are always subject to change, and that ordinance is on the list for review, if you're an exempt development, you could have your site plan waived by the zoning officer. If you were not an exempt development and there's a series of criteria to satisfy, then you would come before the planning board for the change of use. And at that time, the site plan would be reviewed. Now, there's limitations on the site, and the development of the second floor in this manner is going to further limit what can be done as to parking. So as a practical matter, could the planning board do very much if it was a permitted use and the site could not otherwise change? I can think of some others that have come up in the last few years where the parking is kind of limited and there's not a lot to do. I agree with Dr. Laufer. However, I feel like it's easy for what it is tonight. And as we've discussed it, I think it works. I think the applicant's been terrific in putting this issue on the table. I think it's fair. I would suggest that a deed restriction could make clear that a deviation was granted under with full consideration of the specific use, and that the zoning board would have the authority to change, or the planning board for that matter, to change the user, on a case-by-case basis. I don't mean to suggest it could never change. I just think you'd want to look at it again and understand it.
Thank you.
Is that taking some of the uses from permitted uses to uses that are now subject to sort of contractual variances or something?
Well, let me give you an example of what I think will get picked up in that particular issue. We don't have, as far as I understand it, a medical classification right now, and we don't require medical parking. Medical parking typically is 6 per 1,000. General office is typically 4. They can be higher, and here in Fairhaven, apparently we require 5 per 1,000. You might not want to let a medical user here, and I think that would be reasonable. You certainly wouldn't want to let a call center or something with a tremendous amount of density. Maybe a general office would be okay. But having a specific opportunity to hear an applicant as to their plan and have some requirements about how many people are working might be something worthy of review. Let's make sure we've heard from everybody. We certainly haven't so far. What does everybody think about what we've got tonight beyond this issue of the deed restriction?
I agree with a couple of other board members, what they said. Initially, there were definitely some concerns with the building was up against the street. And, I really commend the entire team, from Mrs. Berry down to Mr. Kondoris, for working with us to put in place what I think are some great changes. They've been very accommodating. I think the addition of some green space in the parking lot is great. Working with us to put the K-turn in is great. And the overall look of this new design, I think, is one, as we mentioned or discussed in the last meeting, the planning board is envisioning what the downtown is going to become. And I think that this development is a good first step in that direction. And also, I think it's great that Mrs. Berry is choosing to consolidate her business here in Fairhaven. So I think these things that all should be considered. And right now, with the deed restriction in place, I understand that concern, but with the deed restriction, I think it addresses that. So, I think this is a very, a good project. And again, I commend everybody who put their hard work and efforts into this.
Paul, what's your view on the deed restriction?
Well, I think it addresses, that the concern about the parking. I think the deed restriction would address that. I also think that, if you had a high volume business, this, a place with 12 spots isn't where you're going to probably want to set up your business. So I think the laws of economics are going to, address that, but let's put the fail-safe in there that, if somebody does want to put a business in there, a medical, whatever it is, where they're going to need a higher volume of parking, we're protecting ourselves.
I don't want anyone to forget that Mr. Irene has his mute on for a reason right now, because he's concerned that this deed restriction may potentially be challenged. Mr. Brodsky believes that the deed restriction is an appropriate restriction, but there is some debate amongst council. Just want to make sure everybody remembers that.
Did you say Mr. Brodsky believes it is an appropriate?
So the discussion, I don't want to open it back up for Mr. Brodsky unless we absolutely need to, but the discussion amongst Mr. Brodsky and Mr. Irene last month basically related to the effectiveness of the restriction in light of the potential for a new user to be a permitted use. And would the fact that they might be entitled to occupy as a matter of law essentially negate the effect of a deed restriction? Mr. Brodsky, I think, argued that a property owner has the right to restrict their property and that would have weight and would be considered, notwithstanding the land use issues. Mr. Irene's concerned that it might not be effective. At the end of the day, just understand, I don't think either one of them argued it was illegal. They were really debating whether or not 10 years from now, aggressive lawyers could make it ineffective.
My concern about the deed restriction is more on a personal level towards the owner, just because, in life stuff happens. And I have no idea what she paid for the building or how much, she has to pay off on the building. But it concerns me to have a small business owner agreeing to deed restrictions moving into the future, when I think in reality, it's up to the town to address it through its zoning laws. And if, some person or entity comes in to try to put in some other commercial use that requires more parking, I would rather see it be addressed at that time than sort of reaching into the future. Because let's say Mrs. Berry, for some reason, has to sell in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. A potential buyer might look at the deed and say, what the heck is this? I'm not a dance studio. I want to know what I can put in there. I want to put in, I'm not going to say a cannabis shop, okay? I want to put in some other use.
I think you did just say cannabis shop.
I'm not going to say,
you can't.
but I think that the controls that the town needs to impose and consider are better served outside of the scope of, frankly, mucking up deeds with restrictions. So I'm not in favor of that, even though Mrs. Berry may be. But apart from that, it's a great application, great changing in the application.
Mr. Leader, I have a question about a deed restriction. Could you word something to say it doesn't have to be and this is just a question, I don't know the answer. Could you word it in a way that says something that has a similar parking intensity to the dance studio, so therefore the deed restriction could cover a number of permitted uses as long as their parking is not intensive?
So just the nature of a deed restriction is that it's effectively a contractual requirement. So what you're doing is you're binding future owners by these contractual words. And so we could do it as we wanted to do it, and the effectiveness down the line is going to be subject to potential challenge. So yeah, you could do that. And look, I mean, you could use a fast food restaurant. You could use a bunch of different examples of how things would be different. I want to move beyond this, because if this is all we're going to talk
Yeah.
about, then we'll do it. But I just want to make clear that this application has been a dance studio from go. Everything that we've looked at in terms of how this works relates to Ms. Barry's operation. And I appreciate all of the changes, and even the rear entry is really geared towards what's great for the kids. And all of that is wonderful. I think if it were put up as a generic office building, you would have looked at it differently. You might have thought about what the compromises were differently. And I don't want to lose sight of that.
Sure.
Let's hear from somebody who hasn't spoken with regard to how they feel. Mr. Ridgway.
Yes, thank you so much. I think this was a very good, well done, really. I think we had a good meeting last time. I think a lot of concerns were put out, and I believe what I saw tonight, aesthetically, I love the way the building sits within that little group of buildings. It's an art center. It looks pretty open. There's a lot of, I love the balcony. I love that you could actually have people out there. Everything I've seen, I would really commend. The one comment from the what do we call our audience? I think is a tribute to what's going to go on here. I think it's a great little thing that you got here. So thank you so much for all the hard work that you put into the design and the aesthetics of it. It looks great. I would agree with my colleague Patricia. I don't think any kind of deed requirement is necessary. I don't think we need to even think about that. I would think, yeah, somebody would come in there and most likely overturn that if they had to. So why put that in place? I don't see anything wrong with that parking lot, the way it flows back into Navasink Road. Yeah, I'm good on all points, Todd.
Mr. Ridgway, you good with the front awning and the sign?
Yes, sir. Yeah, nothing. I don't see anything wrong with that. Again, I see it how it sits next to the other building. I think you need that actually I would assume it's a little space there that if it were raining or inclement weather in the front, you could be a bit protected. I love the even though that's not really an entrance, I really like the back and how that's, the one thing was and I'm not going to get into the trash cans because I would agree with Mr. Kennedy. It's such a well done site. I'm assuming those cans will most likely be someplace else. I'd hate to say all the way at the end because I know that's a little difficult, but it's going to be a really nice place in the back there for the kids to come and go and parents to drop it off. I think it's really well done. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Mr. Ridgway. Mr. Ryan, you're up.
Not a lot to add, Mr. Chairman, that hasn't already been said, but I want to just thank Ms. Barry and her team for taking our comments at the last meeting to heart. I think it's an improved application. I think it looks great. I think it's going to be a credit to Fairhaven for years and years to come. And thank you, Ms. Barry, for making this investment in Fairhaven. Much appreciated.
Okay. So it sounds to me like there's a lot of enthusiasm about the application and there is an open question with regard to the deed restriction. Best way to deal with this. First of all, with regard to the awning, are we all in agreement that we could put a condition in a resolution of approval which would entitle the applicant to reuse the awning, but that to the extent that that awning needs to be rebuilt, that it would be rebuilt within the property boundary? Are we all in agreement on that?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yes.
Yes.
Was there anything else that was, I guess any resolution of approval would include the revision to the site plan relating to the 8 and 8 handicap parking stall, would also address the adjustment of the light pole in the rear to the location specified by Mr. Kennedy, and further specify that the light would be on a timer and would be shut down at the end of the day within some reasonable amount of time after the building is no longer being used. Can anybody else think of anything else that we've talked about that we wanted to get into a resolution?
Were there any questions to the numbers? I know there was an adjustment in the square footage that we addressed. Do we have the correct number? With the extra 100 and whatever square feet?
Mr. Irene, that's really to you.
I don't know that, I think what we have is we have the habitable floor area number that was adjusted as Mr. Fitzgerald gave me to 45%, right?
Right.
Isn't that what we're driving at?
Yeah, 44.5. And I think the revised plans prepared by Mr. Condoris have an accurate number. I think the issue was where were we relative to last time, but I think the new numbers are good.
Okay, I just want to, I was just, piece that sometimes gets missed.
Mr. Chair, there was one other minor condition that had to do with the no handle on the side door, on the exterior of the side door.
That was for Mr. Laufer. Thank you, Mr. Brodsky.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that what Mr. Condoris did with regard to the equipment above the tower is terrific. I mean, I think the whole thing looks great, but even just that I think is really very appealing. I think it's going to have a real good visual impact.
Just one thing about the door handle, I'm sorry. Could you just put a qualifier or as necessitated by the fire marshal or in the building code?
Certainly, Jim, certainly.
Thank you.
How about just emergency exit door? How about we just call it that?
I think that would be better than if the fire marshal wants something on there, then I'd hate to have them come back here.
Yeah, that certainly isn't the intent. So I think that's good. Okay, so all that having been done, I know that both Mr. Ridgway and Ms. Quigley are opposed to the deed restriction. Ms. Johnson, which of the 8 board members are not voting?
I'm sorry?
Which of the 8 board members are not voting?
Mr. Ludman and Mrs. Neff are not voting.
Well, the only issue is, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ridgway joined us late.
Mr. Ridgway actually joined us while we were reintroducing the professionals for the applicant. There was no testimony before he arrived on the fake dais.
That's right. There was no testimony, although I think Mr. Brodsky was characterizing the changes in the application. So the question is whether or not, out of an abundance of caution, Mr. Ridgway should participate. Doesn't get easier, does it, Mr. Chairman?
No, man.
Well, then Mrs. Neff could vote then, correct?
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm just kind of commenting because John's a strong no on the deed restriction.
I'm not trying to alter that one way or the other. I'm just pointing that out, Mr. Chairman, as to, it's true that the testimony had not commenced, but I think Mr. Brodsky was characterizing the changes in the application. So we call that.
No one was listening to my characterizations anyway.
We all listen intently to everything you say, Mr. Brodsky.
Poor man gets caught in traffic and look what's happened.
No comment, Mr. Irene. I think I picked it up quite well.
All right. So Mr. Brodsky, I'll ask you, do you have any concerns about Mr. Ridgway, who's a regular member voting, versus Mrs. Neff, who is an alternate?
I don't. I have no objection.
All right. So I think we'll go ahead and play it as consistent with Mr. Brodsky's opinion. And it's noted that Mr. Irene's the best land use attorney that I know. Okay, so then the issue now is simply left to what we're going to do on the deed restriction, if at all. So I know that we have 2 of the 7 voting members that don't feel that the deed restriction is necessary. I know a few others have expressed an opinion. Mr. Nashesny or Mr. Ryan, do you have an opinion either way?
I understand the desire for it. I respect Mrs. Quigley's point, and I think it's a valid one. To put undue hardship on somebody going forward is not the intent here. And I think I would side with that. I don't know that it's necessary, and to be honest with you, I can see it being contested and probably overturned anyway, because would be a permitted use in the zone. So that's how I feel. I can see the logic behind not deed restricting and not putting undue restriction on the applicant.
Mr. Ryan?
We haven't really used that as a mechanism, to my recollection, on many other applications before. My inclination would be not to impose it on this one. That being said, I'm supportive of this application either way. If enough board members felt strong enough, that should be included.
All right, so Mr. Ryan was fading in and out. I think what he said is that he's leaning against the restriction, but that he supports the application either way, which splits us, if I've calculated it correctly, exactly down the middle, with 3 feeling pretty strongly in either direction and Mr. Ryan waffling in the middle. Look, I want to point out that this is a site plan. I actually can't remember the last site plan we've even seen or heard. I feel as though this is a reasonable restriction, and it's important to me that the applicant started with the proposal that the deed restriction be implemented, has acknowledged throughout the application that it is not a concern or a problem for her, and testified consistent with the idea that this building would be used as a dance studio, and everything about the design is consistent with that. But nevertheless, that still leaves us in a pretty much a tie. Mr. Kinsella, could you be lobbied to move in the no deed restriction direction?
I'm kind of leaning that way now because, as I appreciate what Mrs. Quigley said, but I also keep going back to my thought that, in the future, this might be an issue, but the reality probably is going to be the market is going to kind of take care of the problem. You're not going to put a high volume medical facility there. You have you're going into a spot with 12 spaces. So if I was a business person who needed a large parking lot, that would not be at the top of my list of places to go. You're going to have a business attracted to this building, which is going to be similar in nature, I believe, to a dance studio, where you're not having or an office where you're not having a tremendous amount of volume of cars coming in and out. So I'm kind of leaning in that direction. I supported the deed restriction as, if this was a major concern, it's a way that we can address it. But if we do put this in place and it just gets overturned in 10 years, why are we going to do it?
Could I ask something? Is there any way to incorporate some sort of acknowledgement into the resolution itself that this was passed with the understanding that, its current use is a dance studio and the parking variance was granted based upon that use without actually making it into the deed? Because I know sometimes the old resolutions sort of come up, and it may kind of be half the loaf of controlling the future.
Well, to the extent that the board sees fit to grant the parking variance, there's going to have to be bases for granting the variance. So that would certainly be one of the bases, that it's based upon the testimony of the applicants or their professionals as to the usage that's required for the particular use. But again, we come back to the fact that it's a permitted use in the zone for what that's worth.
So I want to be completely clear. Ms. Barry, I think you've done a wonderful job. I am super excited to see this design get built on River Road, because I was so involved in the affordable housing where this was the design that we chose to try to find a compromise with larger buildings on River Road. So I'm really thrilled. However, with regard to the deed restriction issue, I feel pretty strongly about it. The D variance needs 5 out of 7. So if I were to peel off, I want to make sure it's clear, I would peel off specifically related to this deed restriction issue. That's not enough to become a problem or for there not to be an approval. Mr. Laffer, Dr. Laffer, I would throw this to you and ask you how strongly you feel about that restriction.
I think that the overall package, I would hate to do anything to jeopardize the overall package. And if it means jeopardizing the overall package, then I would certainly withdraw my objection. I think I would like to trigger something where that in the future, if this building is sold, that this at least is something that is considered. And I'm not sure legally exactly how to do that. And I would also like to ask Ms. Berry whether she's willing to accept that kind of a deed restriction, because it might limit her ability to sell the building somewhere down the line. And as Mrs. Quigley said, stuff happens in the future. And, maybe in a period of 5 to 10 years, there becomes a need to sell this, maybe for expansion purposes or whatever. But I like the project. I like everything about the project. I think this is a perfect example of where people have come together to create something that I think is really good, a combination between the board and those people that are proposing the project. So I like the project, but I continue to worry about the parking requirements if the building should be sold.
Mr. Irene, why don't you educate the board with regard to your thoughts about the restriction? And do me a favor and please touch on the issue of, the potential impact of it being overturned 10 years from now, or somebody actually undermining it and making it invalid.
Well, the concern I expressed, Mr. Chairman, last time remains the same, and Mr. Brodsky and I obviously have a difference of opinion on this. The concern I have is whether or not it would be enforceable. And what I try to do is give a scenario of an argument that might be made. Will it be made? I don't know. So we have a situation where we have a permitted use. This is not a situation where we have a use variance, and we're granting a use variance for use that's not permitted in the zone. And as a result of that use variance, we're conditioning the use of the property going forward to the particular or similar use, because we're finding that the use is particularly suited for that site. So we can make out the positive criteria. And in terms of the negative criteria, we'd find that there's no adverse impact because of the nature of the particular use. Here we have a use that's permitted in a general business zone. So my concern would be if I come along 10 years from now and want to buy the building and I see the deed restriction, would I come before the board trying to excise it, remove it? I would first. And if it was denied, then I'd probably go to court. And I'd say to the court that the board was unreasonable in not taking it out, and it probably shouldn't have been imposed to begin with. And the judge would say, well, why is that, Mr. Irene? And I would argue, well, this is just a general commercial use in a general commercial zone. And whatever use I'm permitting is similar. I'm not sure what it is. General office, for instance. Okay. And I would argue that the board saw fit to grant this additional square footage so that the building exceeded the habitable floor area ratio, knowing that the parking is what the parking is, and granted the parking variance to go along with that. So I would argue that if it went for this use, it should go with any of the use that's permitted in the zone, because the governing body had determined that all of these standards in the zone apply to all of these uses that are permitted, and they're fungible. I should be able to switch in one or another. I'm not talking about a medical office building if that's permitted. I'm not talking about other uses that may not be permitted. I'm talking about what I'm going to call fungible, generally permitted uses in the business zone. And that's the argument I would make. I would say this relief runs with the land. It was given to a generally permitted use. I'm a generally permitted use, even though I'm not a dance studio. The board saw fit to put this additional square footage on the building. The building's been built. Judge, you're really going to limit it now, so either half the building can't be used or only be used by a dance studio. That's unreasonable, and it should be stricken. And that's the way I think the argument would go. And the board members can decide for themselves how they would rule if they were the judge. Again, I'm not suggesting that you should or should not impose it. I simply raised concerns about under those circumstances. I certainly couldn't guarantee that it would be enforceable. It may well be. It may not be. So it may not achieve its purpose then, is simply what I'm saying. I don't know.
If we were all sitting around saying, I really don't like this, and I don't think I could live with this unless we were sure to do that, I think that would have more bearing on this. If in fact it wasn't enforced 10 years from now, okay. But I think what we're hearing is that everybody likes it. The question is whether or not you want to add this on top.
and I leave that to the board. I'm simply amplifying or restating the concern I expressed. If that was a driving factor of the board or something to consider in the future, I simply wanted to express my concerns. That's all. So the board was aware. I'm not trying to dictate or spin the board or turn the board as to what they should or shouldn't do. I'm not advocating anything. I just want to be clear that I'm not so sure that that would be enforced.
Mike, if I could ask you, what do you
Sure.
think? What do you think about just a condition, putting a condition in the resolution? And so, you know, that's discoverable, you know, that's obtainable as part of due diligence. And so that, coupled with, I think it was Mr. Kinsella's point, which I think we spoke about last time briefly, is that, you know, to a larger extent, there's going to be a self-policing mechanism here, just by virtue of, you know, if someone is looking to, someone with a call center is looking to pack a high density of bodies into a small space, this is a building that's not going to work. So if you've got the sort of market sort of controllability as well as a condition in a resolution, you know, that's going a pretty good way.
Well, and I'll simply answer your question, Rick, because you posed it to me. And again, this is not a debate. I'm just answering your question. Number one, economic market-driven forces are not legal issues that I really would opine on. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not, you know, an economist, and I'm not sure that it matters for purposes of land use decisions. The issue of whether or not a material condition should be set forth in a deed restriction, there's case law that says if there is a material condition such as that the board should, now whether it should in this case or not, I leave to the board, but there's case law that says that the board should make it a matter of public record. So either prospective purchasers or potential lessees are on notice because they're going to do a title search. Again, whether the board wants to impose that or not here, I don't know. But I would think that if that was significant enough to make it a condition, then that's the type of condition that probably should be set forth in a deed restriction to put interested parties on notice. And again, I'm not advocating what the board should do one way or the other. I'm answering your question.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So look, voting members are Peter, Pat, Marty, Sam, me, Paul, and John. The only people that I've heard feeling strongly about this is myself and Dr. Laufer. It sounds like Paul was coming in the direction of living without it. Marty was leaning towards living without it. So it seems to me if you proceed with a motion, I've already laid out the conditions. Maybe you want to remove some, maybe you want to add some. Somebody that is not in favor of the deed restriction can go ahead and make that motion. And you shouldn't need either one of our votes. You need 5 out of 7, unless someone's changed their mind.
I will make the motion to approve the application as presented tonight with the conditions set forth before and without the deed restriction.
I'll second that.
Just before you vote, the only question I have for you is, because then Mr. Brodsky brought up the issue of making it a condition, even though you do not want a deed restriction, do you want a condition in the resolution that the relief was granted based upon this use and the parking that's generated by it or a similar use or not? Or do you want me to leave that out entirely?
I would have thought that would have been the heart of the resolution. I would have assumed that that's automatic. And Pat, consistent with what you said before, it's no longer a deed restriction. It's pulling attention to the basis for the approval, which is undoubtedly what we've talked about for 2 nights now.
I think it would be important to put in the resolution. I'm just not sure what you mean exactly, Mike, when you say making it a condition. Just
whether it's an express condition that the relief is tied to the nature of this use. Now I can again, I just want to know that if the vote passes, what I'm supposed to do. I can draft it up, of course, and the board members who voted to approve it can always look at the resolution and say, that's not what we meant. Okay. I just didn't know whether I should be putting it in or not.
Todd, I'd like to vote for in favor of the project, but how do I do that if I have an objection to to doing it without a deed restriction?
Well, the motion is without the deed restriction. So you can, theoretically, it's been seconded, but we can debate the motion itself. We've largely been doing that already. And you can express to the other board members why you feel as though that condition is appropriate and see if you can convince them otherwise. I've already telegraphed what I'm going to do. I've also telegraphed that if you don't feel that you want to vote in favor of it, that there are 5 other members that appear to be willing to vote in favor of it.
Do you want to rethink your motion and include
No,
something?
no, I'm comfortable. Mike, I think making it a condition is fine in the resolution.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I understand.
Mr. Lapp, are you okay with where you are?
Yes.
Just a question, Mrs. Quigley, can you just restate that then with the complete?
Yes, the application as presented tonight without a deed restriction, but with a condition set forth in the resolution that the parking variance was granted upon the specific use of the property as a dance studio.
Chesney,
Yes.
Ms. Quigley,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgway,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Dr. Laufer,
I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Kinsella,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
No. Congratulations, Ms. Barry. You've been approved. And I just want to echo what everybody said. Your project team did a great job. This is a tremendous compliment to Fairhaven and the first building for the future. It's great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr.
Thanks, Jason.
Good night.
Good night. And thank you.
All right, let us not waste any time. The next matter on the agenda is, help me, Jenna, close my agenda.
Mr. Guerrero, 8 Hendrickson Place.
That's the one.
I just brought Mr. Ludman back to the DS.
Hey, Mr. Ludman, how you been?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, he's here.
And I'll be
Is it
leaving.
okay if I, oh, sorry, Mr. Kennedy.
Kennedy. Very
Good night,
valuable.
everyone.
Appreciate your input.
Take care.
Chairman, is it okay to start bringing Mr. Guerrero and his professionals over?
Yes, please. Thank you, Jen.
Okay.
Yep, I see. Okay. Hello?
Hi, Mr. Guerrero.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay.
And do you just have Mr. Grammer with you tonight, or is there
Yes,
anyone else?
yeah, my lovely wife is next to me, and Mr. Grammer should be tuning in any second.
I'm Lara Robbie. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
And Mr. Chairman, we should indicate for the record that we reviewed the notice materials at the last meeting. The matter was carried. We did not commence the testimony. It was carried to tonight's meeting without the necessity of renotice. We're going to swear Ms. Gabe, our professional planner, and you do swear in testimony to give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do?
And we're going to swear in Mr. Guerrero. If you'd raise your right hand, please. You do swear in testimony to give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Would you give us your address, Mr. Guerrero?
8 Hendrickson Place.
Okay, and is Mrs. Guerrero going to testify?
Yes,
Lara
Robbie.
Mrs.
I
Robbie.
have a different last name.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. I'm reading the underneath your,
Just
Okay, so-
for legitimate purposes.
okay. Could you give us, I'm sorry, could you give me again your full name, please?
Lara, Lara.
Uh-huh,
Last name Robbie, Robby.
okay, and your address?
8 Hendrickson Place.
And I'm going to swear you do swear testimony to give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And Mr. Grammer, would you give us your full name, spell your last, your address for the record, please?
Ron Grammer, Grammer, 241 Maple Avenue in Red Bank.
And we're going to swear you and do swear in testimony to give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Do you want to mark any exhibits before we begin?
I don't believe so. I think I'm going to utilize the screen share quite a bit to hone in any points.
So Mr. Guerra, here's what we have. We have the application and we have all the materials that were submitted with the application. And to the extent that you're going to refer to those materials, we can identify them from the application itself. If you have anything that wasn't submitted with the application, then it would be helpful to pre-mark those items. So if we have any colorized exhibits, any additional photos, things such as that you'll want to present to the board?
No, I think I'm all set with that.
All right, good. Well, then we're going to turn it over to you. You've got an application before us tonight for a few variances. So why don't you help the board understand what we're looking to do?
Sure. I'll try to make this brief. My wife and I moved to Fairhaven from Brooklyn about 4 years ago. And at the time, this lovely 1.5 story cape, that's a little over 1,600 square feet, felt like a mansion coming from the city. And alas, our kids are growing up. My son is going to be a teen shortly, and my daughter right behind him. And I'm losing something here.
Okay.
And so what we are requesting is to build upon the existing footprint of the home and make it a 2 full story home and transition that into a colonial and bump out the back, which there's currently a deck, and it would pretty much replace the deck and give us 4 bedrooms upstairs. Currently, the way this is laid out, there's a master bedroom on the first floor, which we've been using as an office / homeschool studio for the kids and my wife. And my wife and I are sleeping in one of the bedrooms upstairs, and my kids are sharing the other bedroom in a bunk bed because we don't like sleeping on a different floor of our kids. So that is the gist of it. So I think we can just kind of roll along. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you guys put in some serious hours here. So
What is it that you're proposing to do, Mr. Gale?
So basically what we're doing is, what we're requesting is basically converting this 1.5 story cape into 2 full stories. Because right now the front half of the house is it's a knee wall, so it's just dead space, and we would like to build up, over the existing footprint, and then bump back 15 feet to make a kitchen that actually can fit more than 4 people comfortably, and also adding a mudroom right off of the kitchen, because right now when you walk into our house, you walk right into the dining room. There's no buffer, so it's a dining room, the living room right off of that. There's nowhere to hang your jacket, store your shoes, things of that nature. So it's kind of exposed. So what we would like to do is really move the heart of the home toward the rear of the house.
Are you seeking to add bedrooms?
Yes.
How many?
So there will be 4. There's a master suite that is the second floor of the addition, very modestly sized. 2 medium to small sized bedrooms and a very small guest room upstairs. Yeah, so that's what we're doing there.
So is Mr. Grammer going to testify, and are we going to walk through the plans? I think it's important that we understand the variances that are triggered by the application. There's a D variance that's actually triggered by the application tonight. The D variance requires a supermajority, 5 out of 7 votes. And the criteria that needs to be satisfied in order to grant a D variance is very particular. Mr. Irene can run through that if that would be helpful. But maybe we should get Mr. Grammer to put the plans up and kind of walk us through it. And maybe start by identifying specifically what the variances are that are triggered. And maybe Mr. Grammer, you can help us understand why we need those variances.
Okay, I'll start with the existing house and what's conforming and what's not. Currently, the lot is undersized. It's required to have 10,000 square feet. It's only a 7,400 square foot lot. The frontage is required to be 75 and it's 50 feet wide. And that's really what gives us the most difficulty. It's supposed to be 100 feet in depth. We were at 146, so that actually helps a little bit. The front yard setback is supposed to be 30. The house as existing is 21 and a half. The rear yard setback is 30. We're not going to have any issue with that. The big one is the side yard setback is required to be 10 feet. Currently, the house is 5 feet off the property line, and the addition at the rear would align with the existing house, which means that would also not conform as well. It would be 5 feet from the side yard setback. Maximum habitable floor area ratio required 0.28. Currently, it's at 0.22. So to increase by 0.06 is going to be tough. We're actually going to be at 0.38 when you factor in adding a whole second floor to the house. Right now, the house only has a partial second floor. We intend upon building over the entire footprint. Building coverage we do comply with because the lot is relatively deep. 35% is required. We're currently at 16 and a half, and we would be going to 22.4, so that's fine. Height's no issue, maximum storage is no issue. So really the biggest issues are front yard setback, which is an existing nonconformance, side yard setback, which is also an existing nonconformance, but we're not going to be making any worse. We're also not going to be able to comply with it. And the floor area ratio, which is always a challenge, is we're going to be over by from 0.28 to 0.38. So that's really the toughest challenge we have. So just side yard setback and floor area ratio.
Yeah, so just to clarify, wherever you are creating new structure within that setback, you're exacerbating the nonconformity. So you're exacerbating it laterally and horizontally. Yes. When you go up and make the house bigger. You could have bumped in that addition to conform to the 10 feet if you bumped it 5 feet, and that would have been a different argument. But
well, it makes the rear kitchen almost unusable if we take another 5 feet off the kitchen.
I think we should spend some time talking about it, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands what the variances are. Mr. Kramer, let me ask you how you calculated square footage, because as you described what the square footage was, I'm wondering whether or not we've captured the entirety of the second floor. Do you have a plan to share with us so that we can all look at a document?
Yes, give me a second here to share this with you. Okay, can everybody see that?
It's coming. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first floor. I'll zoom in here. This line here where my cursor is the existing rear of the house. This is the side wall, which is 5 feet from the property line. This hatched in area here would be the new addition. And as you can see, we're adding a mudroom space, a coat closet, and a kitchen with a center island and countertop space on either side. So overall, we have 26 feet. We're pushing in on the one side so that we're not exasperating this side yard setback on the one side. But this side, if we pushed in another 5 feet, we'd have a kitchen around 13 and a half feet, which is just going to become too tight because this is the traffic flow of people coming in and out. The driveway is on this side. When people come into the house, the thought is they would come through this back door now rather than through the front door, enter through the mudroom and come in through this part of the house. So we're trying not to, restrict access through this house. I should say we did have an interior designer lay out the kitchen and the bathroom and some of the pantry space and the laundry space upstairs. So she did have some input as to how we developed this plan. But the thought is this would be an eat-in kitchen with kids and everybody, the family sitting at the center island.
So this is the 2-sheet set of floor plans and
yes,
elevations.
This is showing you, I'll just orient you here in the upper right corner rather is the bulk statistics. This is the site plan here, the survey showing all the setbacks. First floor plan, second floor plan. Up here in the corner is the existing second floor, and I can show you that real quickly. You can see how small the existing second floor is. It's 2 bedrooms, 2 closets, 2 bathrooms. It takes up roughly half the existing second floor. We propose to basically build over the whole second floor, which would be this year.
I just wanted to mark it, Mr. Grammer. So this is
Sure,
a
yep.
two
Yes.
sheet set of floor plans and elevations. It's captioned alterations and additions to the Gaero Residence 8 Henderson Place,
Correct.
prepared by Ron Grammer, Grammer Designs LLC, dated March 6, 2020, no revision date.
It was revised per the comments from the town on, 3/19/20 is the revision date.
3/19/20. Okay, that'll be A-1. Thank you.
Another thing we thought about too when we were designing the rear addition was the look of the house. That was important to them. I think we ended up doing 8 different iterations of this house, trying to conform, trying to make it work with the existing house, trying to minimize costs. And in the end, it just didn't make sense. It was too small of a house. It was a Cape Cod. It was very difficult to deal with the existing roof lines. It just made sense to take the whole second floor off and basically start from scratch and give them actual usable space.
I want to give the board the total existing square footage, habitable square footage, and the total proposed.
Okay, so you can see here, the existing first floor is 1,068 square feet. The second is 594, total 1,662. We're proposing to add 390 square feet off the rear of the house. That would be the kitchen and the mudroom. And then the second floor would be 758, adding an 1,148 square feet, total of 2,810. And then you can also see there how we go from the floor area ratio of 0.22 to 0.38.
So I was really getting at this issue. I'm not exactly sure that you've calculated square footage in accordance with the statute, with the local ordinances. There is, I don't know enough about exactly the way it's configured, but there's at least an argument that you have a first and a second floor above your existing foundation. And while I understand it's finished currently as attic and not as living space, the ordinances essentially track that space from sill plate to sill plate. So arguably you might be at 2140 currently, and then your proposal would be to add 390 plus 390, whatever that is, to get you to that 28. I'm not arguing that your 2810 isn't the number at the end of the day. My issue is the delta between what you have versus what you're asking for is arguably less than what you've presented. I say that more for the board's edification than anything else.
I have a question for Mr. Grammer. Can you describe a little bit what's going on in the front of the house? Aren't we exacerbating an existing nonconformity there as well, since you're adding mass in a nonconforming front setback?
Right now, the current front of the house here is at 21.5 feet. The new addition, we did step it back to 26.31. So while it does not comply, it is further back. That was a function of both making usable space on the inside as well as making the outside, visually interesting and, consistent with the character of the home. This would be the front elevation here. We tried to, incorporate some of the roof lines, there's existing front porch. We kept that. We tried to keep a porch roof over it to break it up a little bit. Rather than just building a box on top of a box, we tried to break up the facade with horizontal siding and, the board and batten. And then this would be the area here that would be still non-conforming, but better than it currently is existing.
What's the front yard setback requirement?
30.
So aren't you building at 26?
26, yeah.
So
its existing is 21.
Right. So the new second story front facade doesn't comply with 30.
No.
Okay. And we're
trying to improve upon what's there, though.
Right. So the lower left, I guess that is probably the east elevation.
Yeah, this is the this would be east.
Right. So the front of the house is to the right, as we look at it. That's the front. Okay. So what you have right now is you have a front porch that projects off the front facade. That's as it sits today. So as you build the second story, you're building above the existing front wall of the home, correct?
Yes.
For this portion here, yes. This
Okay.
portion here is stepped back.
The portion on the right-hand side looking at the front elevation?
Yeah, this wall here is the existing wall that remains. On this side, the existing front wall is here, and we're stepping back to here. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, so that's the front.
This is the front of the house here. This would be the right side, and this would be the left side. This is the existing outside wall now that we're going to build on top of. On the left side, this is the existing wall on the right side, but we're going to step back 5 feet and build here.
So your east elevation doesn't look to be accurate then. There's actually structure behind that porch as you look through it east to west.
Yeah, it continues past. You're absolutely right. It does continue past. The
But
roof line continues past. This should be sided here. This should be siding here.
So that's existing. So the 21-foot setback is measured to the existing front porch and the front of the house, at least to the right of it. So the front porch is flush with
Correct.
that. Okay.
Correct.
And where have you?
Here, I'll go back to this.
Where have you measured your front yard setback to? The facade of the home or the steps?
It took, well, the surveyor took it to the facade of the home here, 21.5. The steps would project further past, which would be making it even less.
Okay, so for the purpose of our record, the front yard setback that exists is the first step that's 6 inches above grade.
Right.
So the numbers that we're talking about are all still relevant, but there's a nuance difference there that we just have to track. So look, let's talk about the layout of the addition. You got a few things going on here, and we've seen a lot of this, so we certainly recognize what you're trying to do and appreciate it. You've got a design for a more modern home, and you're coming out of a home that's obviously got a lot of challenges, for a modern family. I kind of had pointed you to it. I understand the issue with regard to the kitchen and where it is. Is there a functional advantage to having the kitchen where it is versus flipping this addition and moving it to the other side so that the new structure in the rear could conform with the side yard setback?
I guess, so you're saying if I guess we would then not have a mudroom. Is that what you're saying? The kitchen would be on the left?
No, let me clarify. So what we're being asked to do is we're being asked to grant variances, which we can grant if in fact we feel as though the application is essentially geared towards conformance to the extent that conformance is possible and strikes the right balance. Mr. Irene can lay it out with regard to the positive and negative criteria related to the C variances. The D variances are different. The D variances really are tied, the D variance, the floor area ratio, is really tied to the size of your lot. And the argument that you're making is that your lot is undersized. And the logical extension of that is that if this lot were in the proper zone, it would be in the R5 zone because it's 50 foot wide and it has a depth that's consistent with R5. And if you were in the R5 zone, you're arguing, your floor area ratio would actually be 0.40. And so your design conforms to the R5 zone insofar as your proposed floor area ratio is 0.38. So I assume, Mr. Guerra, that that's essentially your argument tonight, that what you're designing is reasonable in light of the fact that if your house were in a zone that's more consistent with its dimensions, that you'd be permitted greater latitude about your floor area ratio, right?
That's correct. And I would also add that the adjacent lots, I believe there are maybe 9 total on my side of Hendrickson Place, are all non-conforming. Each frontage is 50 feet wide. So I'm not sure how I don't know how zoning designations come about, but not one of them conforms to an R10.
So what the board frequently looks at when we have these lots, and there's a lot of them in Fairhaven, is how do we sort of balance the fact that you're in a zone that's inconsistent with the dimensions of your lot and what the requirements are on you. So Mr. Grammer had indicated earlier that with regard to a 50-foot wide lot, the side yard setbacks are difficult for you to satisfy because they're set based on the assumption that you have a 75-foot wide lot. That's also true with regard to the floor area ratio, which I just mentioned. But if you were in the R5 zone, the maximum square footage would be 2,200 square feet. You're proposing 2,800 square feet. So you can't argue, and I'm making the arguments you're not, so I'm not putting the false argument in your mouth. You can't argue, hey, I should be able to do 38 with regard to the floor area ratio, but I should also be able to take advantage of the fact that I'm in an R10 and go 2,800. I'm not focused on either one of those. I just wanted to make sure we covered it. I'm focused on the side yard setback because as I see an addition that is not the full width of the house and an opportunity for the addition to conform to the side yard setback, I'm wondering, and as a layperson, as I look at your plans, it seems to work to move the addition in a few feet so that you comply and reconfigure your kitchen to the other side. And upstairs, if you just shift around the closets, it seems like the master works. And then you would be presenting something that would be closer to conformity.
Okay.
The kitchen right now, the kitchen extends into part of the existing house. The existing house ends here. If we push the addition in 5 feet, you're gonna end up with a weird corner where the kitchen intersects the existing. Sean, you want to add on that?
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. So if we come in 5 feet, I believe the distance between the center island and the counters is about 3.5 feet. So so if we're going to the right edge of the center island, now our existing kitchen is not, it's no longer usable space. So now we have a kitchen that's centered in the rear of the property. And now we have an extra room here. And then also, we're also, there's a thoroughfare here. This, it might be easier if I can screen share, Ron, so I can kind of mouse over. This way, and let me move this. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, let me know if everyone can see that.
Yes.
Okay, so if we go in about 5 feet, we're looking at, right around here. Now this just becomes wasted space. And now we have, there would not be room for like a thoroughfare because if we're gonna have a seating area, we wanted to block this off due to a cellar door that swings outward. And really what we'd be doing is shifting all of this over, and then we'd be infringing on the left side setback. So that's a bit of a hardship there, because now this landing is protruding, closer to our neighbor on this side.
Well, look, you're encroaching in a different way. You're 5 feet on that side. You
Right.
have how many feet on the other side? You have at least 15, right? 20?
I believe I'm gonna say 13. But we're limited, the combined setback, I believe, is 24. So we're limited right now with the addition being flush to the right. We've got a 26-foot wide addition plus the landing and the steps. We would have to possibly give up the mudroom, and that would be really difficult to live with, because right now we have no storage space. And then also what it does to the upstairs is, because we have a centered stairway, now there's really not room for a master bath.
So I heard that you did 8 iterations. Did you actually have iterations where you pulled this side in?
Yes. So basically, a couple of years ago, we started this and tried to conform to the setbacks, and it just looked really funky because you had a 1.5-story cape with a skinny 2-story structure jutting out the center of it, and it just, it would be cost effective and it would give us the usable space we want, but it would not fit in with the character of the homes around me, which, by the way, all of the homes around us are roughly anywhere from 25 to 2,800 square feet.
Where are you getting that information?
What tax records?
And are those houses on lots that are similar to yours?
Yeah, they're all similar, with the exception of the opposite side. They have deeper lots, same frontage, but deeper lots. There was a home built two lots down, which you guys are familiar. I believe it was 4 Hendrickson Place, and they were granted basically roughly what we're asking, and all we're trying to do is build over the existing footprint, make this more livable, more usable. The other problem we have with conforming and just jutting out the center is the roof line becomes an issue, and like the symmetry is off, and it just looks like an appendage, a smaller appendage that shoots out the rear center, and it just, from a curb appeal and again, character of the street and neighborhood, it just does not, it didn't work. And that's why we paused and then, came back and forth for a long time now.
Mr. Guerra, could I just ask about this plan around the kitchen?
Sure.
Currently, I guess your kitchen is where your pantry's going to be, correct?
Yeah, this is the existing kitchen, right?
And so it would be open. What you're seeking to build would be a room that opens up to the new addition and takes advantage of the space that's in your old kitchen for storage, basically.
Yeah, storage, as well as.
And are you putting counter space? Is that the plan? Counter space along that outside wall there?
This right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are counters, sink, dishwasher, oven.
And does the counter space that you're planning or seeking to build extend into your old kitchen rather?
Yes. This is the old kitchen right here.
You're planning on putting counter space on the outside of a new pantry and then hooking it around all the way down that exterior wall?
That's correct.
So your problem is that it's a really great design to marry the rooms together. I really like the way it flows, but it's sort of built as though there's really not any issue with the side yard setback, because it does really impose a lot of mass very close to the property line, which is what the side yard setbacks are designed to sort of protect against. So that's why you're a little bit up against it in terms of the side yard setback. But I think it's clear why this is a desirable approach to adding the kitchen, the new kitchen, and hooking it into where the old kitchen is. I think it really makes sense, from an interior perspective.
Yeah, we spent, thank you for that. I appreciate that. We spent a lot of time with my sister-in-law is Rachel Robbie of Rachel Robbie Designs. She's worked with Mr. Grammer and a lot of the local architects, and she's just a very efficient space planner and really utilizes existing space and uses it efficiently. And what we love about the version 8 or whatever it is at this point is that none of the rooms are ostentatious. They're all very modest rooms. The master bedroom is 14 and change by 16, that being the biggest, but the rest of our rooms they're very small, 10 by 12 bedrooms, walk-in closets, which are storage is key to a functioning home.
But you really wouldn't be able to take advantage of that open concept between your old kitchen and your proposed new kitchen if you had moved the new kitchen back.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why when we tried to conform, our existing kitchen just became a dead room, and and then it became choppy because you're walking in and the stairs are here, and a new room starts here. It's just the flow of it was just not something we wanted to pursue further.
Mr. Guerrero, I think I know the answer to this question, but for everyone's benefit, when you stand in front of the house and you look at the house, what is adjacent to the property line on the right-hand side of your house?
Okay, that is an empty lot. When the meeting is open to the public, our neighbor that owns the lot and the lot next to it where she currently resides, she's all for this, and she's going to speak on our behalf. She's become family to us, and she's enthusiastic about it, and so it's an empty 50-foot wide lot.
Is that her yard, or is that a lot that she plans to sell or develop in a future time?
I can't speak to what her plans are for the future, but it's been an empty lot for a long time. She owns it, but she lives on the lot next to it.
If it's undersized and they're in common ownership, they may have merged.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point, that the real question is whether or not it is a separate legal lot capable of being developed, not necessarily what the current owner's intentions are. Mr. Irene points out that a non-conforming lot that is owned in common ownership with another may be merged as a matter of law. So while it may have a lot designation, it may not be subdividable at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify with regard to the discussion that I was not proposing that you keep the existing layout and simply shift it over, nor was I suggesting that you shift it over and try and respect the setback on the other side. The most egregious deviation is the 5 feet from the side yard. Air, light, and open space is a factor the board needs to consider. And when we're 5 feet, which is less than even the minimum required in R5, we're imposing on the neighboring property, whether there's a lot there or not. And as we go up 2 stories, we create these tunnels. And so the question is whether or not there was an alternative that would eliminate exacerbating that condition. That was the nature of the question.
Do we have a photograph of the existing property rather than just the layout? I'm curious what it looks like from the street.
There was a lot in the packet. Does the applicant have the ability to put them up and sort of walk us through?
Yes. Yep. Give me 1 second here. Stop sharing. And let's see. This is the rear. Yep. Okay. And Okay, so this is the front of the home as it exists now.
And Mr. Guyer, before you go further, this is part of what was identified as a 13-page set of photographs, or is this the 4-sheet set of photos of the subject property?
This was the first set that I submitted.
It was the 4 sheets.
Okay, these are all of your house?
Yes.
So this is Exhibit A-2, 4-sheet set of photos of the subject property, and now you can identify each one, please. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, what is it, I'm sorry, what do you, are you?
I'm
No, I
just
was just
curious. I
gonna
wanted to
say-
see if you had a picture from the street that showed that lot next door.
Oh,
and-
sure, yeah, give me one sec, I believe. One second here. This might work. Let's see. Okay, so here is the side. I may have a
That's
wider
okay.
as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
Just wanted to get a sense of where your house sits on the lot and is being proposed.
Okay.
I don't know if I can or should share my screen, but I have a view from Google Earth that shows the empty lot as well as the house further out, that gives you a view of maybe what you're looking for.
So if
That's up
you've
to
seen
Mr.
it,
Irving.
if you've seen it, Ms. Neff, why don't we put it up and we'll identify it for the entire board?
Okay, let me see if I can do this without messing up. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
I think that gives a good view of how far away the other house is, and probably why, from a desirability perspective of the applicants, they probably would prefer to have the kitchen on that side as well. It's the sunny side in the afternoon, and it looks out to a beautiful yard.
We're going to call that Exhibit A-3. Actually, let's call it B-1. It's a board exhibit, I guess.
Mr. Greimer, let me ask you, as we look at the west side of the home on this photo, what is the existing ridge height and what is the proposed ridge height for the proposed addition?
The existing height is 21.5 feet. We're going to 31.5 feet.
And the entire length of that side of the house as proposed is how long? What's existing and what's proposed?
35 feet 5 is existing and we're adding 15 feet.
Mr. Greimer, is that the corner of the house that the second floor will be set back from the front facade?
The front, yes, that front corner is the side that will be set back.
And how far back will it be from what we're looking at right now on the front?
It would be almost 5 feet further back.
On the other side that we're not looking at, where the porch is, will the
That will
second
line up with where it is currently at.
will the second floor be in line with the porch?
No, with the existing wall, which is back almost 6 feet.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble visualizing that. And the new front facade that you're looking for, will the entire front facade be in line with itself, or will there be a jog on the second?
There'll be a jog. The corner closest to us will align with the far edge of that window you see there.
Right.
And then the other side will be a foot back from that.
Should I,
So you're 5 foot back on this corner, 6 foot on the other corner.
So the entire second floor will be set back from the front facade, even though it doesn't comply with the setback requirements for the front yard.
Correct.
It will remain out of compliance, but it will not be exacerbating it as badly as it would if you were just sticking a second floor on top of where the first floor is.
Correct. We had to balance, structural provisions with this as well. I mean, the further back I go, the harder it is to structure that second floor. So
should I stop sharing at this point? Just let me know what what you'd like me to do.
I'd just like to ask, keep it up for a minute, Leilene. When you go back, Mr. Grammer, the new addition where you want to put the kitchen, that's going to remain in the same plane as the side that we're looking at right now. You're not coming any closer to that white fence than the house is now.
same plane.
You're just pushing it back 15 feet.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Grammer, getting back to the front facade of the house, was there any thought given to sloping the roof the other way so that you didn't have as much of a frontage, if you will, on the streetscape?
I think we tried that at one point because that's how the existing roof is. We tried to work with the existing roof line, and it has multiple pitches there. It actually has 3 different pitches, 2 on the front, 1 on the back, and it was almost impossible to try to make that work. It also would have made the ridge too high. I think we would have exceeded the height limitation had we pitched the roof the other way.
Thank you for that.
Maybe you could go through some of the stuff you want to do with the second floor if nobody has anything else to say about the first floor right now.
Okay.
Sean, do you want to walk through the second floor?
Yes, yep. All right, so I will bring that back up and share that. Okay. Okay, so here is the existing staircase. And the master bedroom is here. We basically wanted to make it deep enough so that we could fit a master bed in with a couple feet on either side of it. And we opted not to do a full bath because we didn't want to exacerbate the side yard any more than we had to. So that's what we're doing there. Storage here. Small guest room here. And a shared bathroom for the children's bedrooms here, and a laundry upstairs as well.
Are you picking up the whole second floor and putting a new one on? Is that what you're?
Yes, yeah. So basically, currently, due to the nature of this cape at least, the second floor height is about 88 inches, and the temperature difference between the second floor and the first floor is, it's got to be close to 8 degrees, sometimes more, because there's about 6 inches or so between the asphalt of the roofing shingles and the actual ceiling. This was built in 1944. So there's, it's really, there's no insulation and there's no ventilation. So we just decided, okay, let's just start fresh, because the ceiling heights are not to code, and there's no ventilation, and we would like to create a home that is, ecologically friendly that, so we can save the planet and save money on the utility bills.
You mentioned that the master bedroom was 14 by 16. Is that correct?
Yes, I look at 14.8 by 16.
Okay, can you just run through the sizes of the other bedrooms, please?
Yes, this bedroom here, the guest bedroom is 10 by 11, a little more than 10 by 11. One is 12 by 14, but there's a kind of funky angle here. And then this one here is 12 by 11 and change. And then, with an entrance over here.
Yeah, the bedrooms are relatively modest. You've got a lot of space dedicated to closets on the second floor. I just want to bring this kind of back beyond the side yard setback issue. You've got 2,800 square feet on what's effectively an R5 lot, which the cap is 2,200. So there's a lot of square footage beyond what is permitted by the ordinance on a similar size lot. Although you're in R10, I'm not suggesting otherwise.
Now, could the case be made that our lot more resembles a 7.5 as opposed to a 5, seeing as we're close to 7,500 square feet?
Yeah, so in that zone, the cap is 30/20, right?
Yes.
And what are the other requirements?
I believe it's a 7-foot single side and 16 combined.
So what we should do, look, I think that there's a valid argument to be made with regard to what you're proposing relative to how it would look if the lot was in either R5, R7.5, or R10 zone. But we got to pull table C and get the actual numbers. We shouldn't be speculating as to what that
Right. Well, those are the numbers. I've been obsessing over this stuff. So yeah, for an R7.5, I'll pull it up. Let's see, where are we?
Mr. Chairman, the R75 has a 60-foot frontage requirement, and I think the FAR is 0.35.
Thank you, Mr. Ron.
So interior lot, so we're very close to the interior lot. We're off by 10 feet in the front. And single side is 7, total side is 16. So we're much closer to that, I believe. So if let's just assume for argument's sake, we were proceeding as if our lot was an R7.5 with a FAR of 0.35, that gets us to about 2,600 square feet. And I guess I don't know, like we're talking square footage from the exterior. So it's 2,800 square feet where we're proposing, but the actual interior usable space is closer to 26. I don't know what the, I don't know. Are we talking exterior measurements or interior? I'm not
It's
sure.
exterior. Every house is measured the same. So if it's 26 for you, it's 26 for somebody else, but it measures at 28. There's an argument to be made that you're working around an existing structure. So there's a hardship that's created by the fact that you're trying to conserve money and be efficient about your design. There's no question about that. The question is whether or not 2810 or whatever the final number is the right number, whether or not the layout is the right layout, and whether or not the argument can be made that all of the variances that are needed should be granted. The floor area ratio, just so you understand, we have the cap. So in an R5 zone, it's 2,200. In the R7.5, it's 30/20. And in an R10, it's 2,200. But the floor area ratio is a secondary cap number. And when you reach the floor area ratio and exceed it, it requires a D variance supermajority because that's seen as the fail-safe with regard to square footage. And so the fact that you're over in the R10 zone is not surprising because the 0.28 is designed around a 10,000 square foot lot. The argument that you've implied and we've talked about allowing the leniency because your lot is more similar to one of these smaller zones, it holds true. The problem is that you then need to assess those other standards along with them. So you can't just take for me, okay, the other board members may think about it differently. If you look at it that way, you need to look at it consistently across Table C and think about how that impacts, what the ordinances suggest is the appropriate size for the house.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaillard, are you planning on matching the siding on the second floor with the siding on the first floor, or are you planning on residing the entire house?
We're planning on residing the entire house. And we haven't decided exactly which material as of yet, but currently the siding is cedar shake, and it's seen better days. So yeah, there's really no way to salvage it.
Mr. Irene, could you just quickly summarize the legal standard for the C variance and the legal standard for the D variance, just for the benefit of the board and the applicant?
For the C variances, Mr. Chairman, on the positive criteria, you can prove the positive criteria one of two ways. The first way is what's known as the hardship, or the C1 criteria. And that's where the hardship is rooted in existing conditions in the land, existing structures on the land, topography. It's hardship rooted in the property or the structure. It's not personal hardship. The second way that one can prove the positive criteria for the C variance is what's known as the C2 or flexible C criteria. And that is that the proposal advances the purposes of zoning and the benefits substantially outweigh any detriment. It's generally seen as a better planning alternative as compared to what the ordinances might otherwise dictate on the particular facts and circumstances at issue. Once the applicant proves the positive criteria, he also has to prove the negative criteria, and that is that there's no substantial detriment to the public good and no substantial impairment of the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. So the notion is, what adverse impacts does it have on neighboring properties, on the streetscape, and how substantial is the scope of the deviation for what the ordinance otherwise requires. So that's the C criteria that pertains to the bulk variances. With regard to the habitable floor area ratio deviation, as you indicate, that's a D variance, and that falls under what's known as the Coventry Square standards. It's the name of the case that set forth the standards. So on the positive criteria there, the issue is whether the proposal can nevertheless fit on the lot, whether the property can nevertheless accommodate the proposal, notwithstanding the deviation. Okay, so it's the focus on the property. On the negative criteria, the substantial detriment to the public good prong, the case law tells us we have to focus on adverse impacts on surrounding properties. And on the substantial impairment of the intent and purpose of the zone plan prong, the case law tells us that the board has to reconcile granting the variance relief with the fact that the governing body has legislatively imposed this particular standard. So can we reconcile the fact that we're granting that floor area ratio variance, notwithstanding the fact that the governing body has said, you know what, it should be limited to such and such a percentage in this zone?
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much for that.
Does anyone have additional questions?
I have a few questions in my report, if I may ask them.
Please do, Elena. Thank you.
So are you proposing any changes to the cellar as a result of the improvements?
No,
And is it a cellar or a basement based upon borough definition?
it is a cellar.
Okay. Are you proposing any landscaping or tree removal?
No, no tree removal. If anything, you know, we would add maybe some more shrubbery to the left-hand side. But yeah, definitely no tree removal.
Okay. Are you proposing any changes to your utility connections?
No.
Okay.
Unless we need to, but no.
I was only asking, because the borough does have an ordinance that utility connections should be installed underground. And right now, I mean, I have up your Google Street View that Elaine showed us earlier. And you do have some overhead wires running to the house. And I was wondering that because of the improvements, you had to disconnect them, if you would then reconnect it underground, since you're doing a pretty major renovation on the house.
Right. To be honest, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, I'm looking to see how this goes before we, you know, take the next step.
Okay. And then is there still a concrete pad in the rear yard?
Yes.
What is it
Yeah.
and what do you use it for?
It's so much fun. So when we bought the house 4 years ago, there was just a concrete pad there. Like the neighbors had a basketball hoop, and you know they had been using it because the house was vacant for quite some time. So what I have gathered from my neighbors is that was a single car garage at one point, and I believe the garage just fell into disrepair, and the owner that basically renovated it and tried to flip it, he just demolished that structure and just didn't want to, you know, put anything else on there.
Okay, and then what is the front yard setback to the stairs in the front yard?
The stairs, I took that today. I believe, no, it was more than that. I believe it was 28. So from the curb to the very first vertical you know, riser or whatever is 28 feet. Yeah. And I believe, does the municipal own like 6 feet of frontage? Or
She doesn't know, but the measurement on your survey to the structure, to the front facade is 21 and a half. So it's certainly something less than that.
I have 16 feet 7.
16.7 from the property line?
Correct.
You've scaled that, right?
And then there is some right of way, like you do have more room between the property line and the curb as well, correct?
Sounds like 11 feet.
Yeah.
10 feet 2.
Hold on one sec.
10 feet 2.
So it's actually, so from the curb to the house, it's really more like 32. From the curb, not the property line.
Right, from the curb,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, the stairway I measured was 5 feet, and from the stair to the curb was 28 feet. So that's 33.
Yeah, 31.9.
Okay. Got it. And so that, I believe, is all of my comments in my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. I'm struggling with the high floor area ratio here. You know, you're permitted 0.28. We're looking at 0.38. I think, you know, it's a good creative argument to look at what R75 would do, but even there, you're at 0.35 and you're still over the cap. And, you know, Mr. Chairman made the point that, you know, generally we try to be consistent with all of those standards. So I'm just curious, you know, if there are other options, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Grammer, if there are other options to reduce the floor area ratio and, you know, what they might be. I know you mentioned you went through several iterations, but I'd just like to press on that a little bit more because I mean, I'm just a little uncomfortable with how high over we are. And Mr. Irene went through the criteria here, and we have to reconcile this to the legislative standard that's been set and the cap, and we're just way over. So we'd probably only be able to build over a portion of the second floor rather than the entire second floor. And I'm not quite sure we can get the number of bedrooms they want in that scenario. As Sean said earlier, we're only getting, you know, 10 by 12, 12 by 14 bedrooms, you know, reducing that. I'd have to figure out how many square feet that is, but it's a fairly large number. It's got to be, you know, a good 800 square feet or so, I would imagine. And right now the second floor is at 1352. So you'd effectively be cutting that in half, I suppose.
Was there any thought given to maybe, it seems like when you're living, you're pushing a lot of the living on the first floor back to the kitchen, the new kitchen, but you're kind of underutilizing perhaps some of the other space that you're leaving behind on the first floor. So for example, you have an existing dining room. I don't know if you would be planning on keeping that with the new kitchen where you're going to be sitting around, because the new kitchen is going to be pretty big. I was just wondering if there's any flexibility with putting so many bedrooms upstairs, whether one of those bedrooms might be able to be peeled off and bring the floor area down somewhat.
Thank you for that. I think basically after all these iterations, we ended up here because we realized for the amount of work and expenditure to get all this done, to then end up with a 3-bedroom home, it didn't seem like something that would motivate us to want to do that. We're also, something that I meant to bring up in the opening, it was that my wife's parents are about a half hour away, and they're you know, they're getting older, and we would like to plan for the future a little bit. And, you know, we would like the ability to be able to have them stay with us, you know, in their later years. So this is all, you know, part of the motivation for this space. I realize this is a personal reason. It doesn't qualify.
So it's okay, but I was just wondering, with older folks, sometimes they need a bedroom on the first floor. A lot of times we have 2 floor, you know, folks coming in for 2 floors. And the new thing is to have the access to a bedroom with a bed.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, our existing bedroom, which is basically our office, would be that. That would be for them, and then our home office would then go to the small guest room upstairs. Because we both we work from home prior to COVID, you know, so we do need office space. But as far as cutting down the square footage, basically, if we have gone over this a bunch, if we did not push back as far, because that's the only logical solution I see. If we went back, say, 10 feet, now the kitchen is 10, we're back to a small kitchen with really not enough room for an island. And then we would have a mudroom whose width would be about 5 feet, you know, so that's a bit small for a mudroom. And then the master bedroom would now be 5 feet wide And
We don't need to continue because that isn't really what's being proposed.
okay.
I want to get back to Mr. Ludman's question, and I want to give a different answer than what Mr. Grammer gave. What you have here is basically a 1,000 square foot footprint. This house is 1,000 square feet, and it's got 2 stories, and it's got a pitched roof. When you look at the 3 bedrooms, what's the fat in this house is the closets on the 2nd floor.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Grammer explains that the rooms are small. They are because they've made the sacrifice to have huge closets. That's unusual, but you can't really do much with the balance of that 1,000 square foot plate. You can't make another bedroom in there. So you need an addition of some sort. The addition that they have is 360 feet. Could you tweak it a little bit? Yes. You go up and down with it, and you wind up with a master bedroom and an addition in the back, which is very common, and essentially building a 700 square foot addition on a 2,100 square foot existing structure. There's logic to that argument. There clearly is. I think what you're struggling with, and I think I'm struggling with it as well, is that when you're asking to deviate from the standard so dramatically to get to the D variance, and you've also got the front yard setback deviation, you've got a significant side yard deviation to 5 feet, and you're extending it horizontally, you're extending it 10 feet up. You've not done anything to soften how you're going to fit that extra square footage in. It's the conflict between those issues. Is there the need to do something? And is there justification here to grant some sort of a variance to make this old house work in a modern day standard? Yeah. But you're seeing it go straight up to the max, and then you're seeing it run straight back to the max. And I think what you want to see, and I'm saying this for the benefit of the applicant, Mr. Grammer, but I'm speaking to Mr. Ludman, I think you want to see it contained so that you're minimizing the impact on the neighbors, so that when you drive by it, you're not wondering if it's too big, because they've done everything possible to hide that square footage somewhere.
Yeah, and that's what I'm struggling with. You're right. I mean, we talked about upstairs. The bedrooms are relatively modest. There's a lot of closet space, and I'm just struggling with going that far back. I mean, I think the answer makes sense, but I'm still like not quite getting there on the D variance.
What I don't know what the number is, but considering that, say we look at the R75 scenario, you're 0.03% from over triggering that D variance. What is that number? And you can't knock that much square footage off to get under the D variance for the 7. Then you can make the 7.5 argument.
And that's what I was kind of getting at. Yeah, like
I mean, there's got to be 0.03% of fat there that is trimmable. I get the whole a closet or not a closet. You've got a box on top of a box, so you know that's not going to help you unless you pull the sides in all the way around by a foot, let's say, or 2 feet. Looking at the overhead map in the completeness review, this property, and I do recall when the applicant said there was a similar case, and now it's coming back to me, but this property sits further forward than any other property on that block from what it looks like to me from the naked eye. So that's something to think about, especially with the 2nd floor, and that's why we want to push it back. I don't have as much of a problem with the addition and I know it's only a 5-foot setback, because given that this is an R10 zone, that empty lot next door to it is not a conforming R10 lot. So it would not be able to be subdivided into a buildable lot.
Well, hold on. If you bought it right, and Mike Irene was your attorney, you bought it into 2 separate names and you didn't merge them. So don't assume that. It's no different than this lot if it's 50 feet by 150 deep.
Correct, but 50 feet by 150 in an R10 zone would have to go before planning to get approval for it, would it not?
No, it's similar to this lot and the ones to the east of it. If it were purchased and transferred properly, it would never merge because you would never put it in common ownership with the adjacent lot next door.
Okay.
I do think, by the way.
And even if it did.
What, Mr. Irving?
I was going to add that even if it did merge, depending on the size of the other lot, the larger of the two, there is the possibility that somebody could go before the planning board and seek a subdivision. If it
Again,
did
to the
merge.
naked eye, they all look equivalent. The 4 lots in a row, actually 6 lots in a row, look pretty similar in size of undersized frontage for the zone.
But as I said, Mr. Leader is also correct that we don't necessarily know if they merged. If they're not in common ownership, then you don't reach the merger issue at all, generally.
You know, when you look at this house from the front, you've got two driveways adjacent to each other on the left-hand side, which gives a spacious kind of a look. And that's not going to change. When you look at the house, look to the right of the house, you've got that vacant lot, which also kind of sets the house up so that it doesn't really look, you know, squished into the neighborhood. And then when you walk the neighborhood and you look around, the finished product on this house, I don't think would be that different from a lot of the other houses on that street. The finished product on this house would really not be out of character at all, you know, from the other houses on the lot. And if you look at 1 Hendrickson Place, which is across the street, it has a similar kind of a lot and a similar kind of a, you know, a massive house. And that also doesn't really look out of place. So I think, you know, from what's being presented here, although it is a little bit over what we would expect, or what we would like to see, I don't think that the finished product would really be out of character from the other houses on the street.
And again, this is simply to make the board aware. I'm not trying to advocate the board proceeding in one fashion or another. I know there was some reference to another variance being granted, and it might have been helpful to have that resolution. But we should also keep in mind that the law tells us that the governing body is presumed to be aware of any nonconformities that may exist. There's a presumption of that. And if the governing body is aware of those and does not change the zone, the presumption is that it is the failure to change it is intentional, that it wants to maintain the zoning as it exists in the zoning order. It's just something to be aware of.
That's even if every single lot surrounding the applicant is not in accordance with the requirements of
That's what the law tells us. That argument is to be made. That argument should be made to the governing body about changing the zone. And if it chooses not to do so, the presumption is intentional. Now, the board may look at that perhaps on the negative criteria and say, you know what, if we approve this, it will not necessarily be out of character, but you still have to get to the positive criteria. And I'm not necessarily talking about the D variance. I'm talking about the bulk variances, the positive and the negative. I simply want the board to be aware of that. That's all. Again, I'm not advocating that you should do one thing or another.
And I struggle with houses on this street, and we've had it before because it's an R10, but there isn't a lot. I don't think there's maybe 1 or 2 lots on the whole street that are R10 lots. But
Look,
that's all I have to say about it.
I agree with that, and I agree with Dr. Laufer's comments. You know, aesthetically, this does not look out of place, but I don't know that we've gone this far on the floor area ratio.
I think there's work to be done there. I definitely.
And I think maybe if there were testimony to that effect, we could understand that a little more. But I having recently looked at another house on the street, I'm quite certain we didn't go this far.
I'm really interested in what the 4 Hendrickson resolution looks like. That was fairly recent, same board. I don't know. They were also renovating something. I don't know, but it'd be really very interesting. I don't want to transition into deliberation. I want to, because we've not yet heard from the public and we haven't yet heard from the applicant that they put on all their testimony. Although I think it's all good discussion. I just don't want to hop to the end yet.
Can I respond to the floor area ratio?
Please do, Mr. Grammer.
So the house as it stands is at 0.22. If we go to the 0.3 that was previously suggested, we would need to reduce what we're proposing by 600 square feet. We're proposing 1,148 square feet, so we're effectively cutting that addition in half to get to the 0.3.
Now, where do you get to 0.35, Mr. Grammer? That's the question I had.
Now, somebody suggested before getting to the 0.3 for the floor area ratio.
No, I think I suggested 0.3. Well, I suggested the cap is 0.28. We're looking at 0.38. And if we try to analogize to R75, then the cap would be 0.35. So I wasn't suggesting we try to get down to 0.28 or 0.3. I think, I don't take as strict an interpretation of, sticking to it. I think this is a unique lot and there's other factors we have to consider. But yeah, I'm thinking like, if we can get below 0.35, maybe that's a reasonable compromise.
That would be a reduction of about 250 square feet. So we'd be going from 1148 to closer to 900 or so.
All right, so I think that what the board is talking about and struggling with in the analysis relates to how do all these various standards interrelate to the lot size and the guidance that's provided to us with regard to what's right. I just want to make sure that we amplify that the floor area ratio requiring the supermajority of the board is really the ultimate fail-safe. That is really the one that says something is going on here that's inconsistent with the standards. So we recognize that because you're in an R10 zone, assuming you have 10,000 square feet, that's why it's set at 0.28, your lot is short. If you were in the R75, it would be 0.35, you would be over that. And if you were in the R5, you would be at 0.40, but the cap would be 2,200 square feet. So all those standards have to be thought about together. Is there any more information that you want to share with the board before we open to the public? Because it's getting late and I want to be sure we have an opportunity to do that. There's a lot of people here and I'm sure, perhaps some neighbors of yours or people that have some comments with regard to what we're talking about.
Will I have a chance to respond after the public? Oh, yeah, I'd say let's hear from the public.
You will, and as much as this is freewheeling, we should try and maintain some structure. In theory, okay, in order to address, as Mr. Irene outlined, the criteria that the board needs to analyze in terms of the proofs, you would want to be sure that you've gotten through the bulk of your testimony. Not that you can't respond or we can't keep talking. I just want to make sure we haven't cut off your effort to make sure the board understands why what you're proposing is the right plan for this lot.
Okay, I will sum up real quick then, if now's a good time to do so.
I'm going to give you another chance to summarize, but let's make sure that you are comfortable that you've gotten your points across. So why don't you go ahead and give us a quick summary?
Okay, quick summary is, as it stands, our house does not conform in any way to the character via style or scale in regards to the rest of the homes surrounding us. So I believe that taking on this project and doing what we're proposing adds a lot of value to our street and brings our home in line with our neighbors. I don't see any negative impact as far as I'm not sure what the terminology is, hindering any light or air because there's an empty lot on the side. And we're really trying to use the existing footprint, something that it doesn't seem to be happening as much as it used to in this town. We're really trying to make do with what we have, keep some of the charm, and make a modern home that functions for a family of four and a grandparent or two in the future. I do realize that we've got 3 existing nonconformities, and we've addressed them, I believe, in a manner that does not exacerbate too much. The front, we're shooting back 6 feet. Everything is being pushed to the rear because we've got a lot of space in the rear, and I think it would fit in perfectly with our neighbors. The size of the homes are pretty similar. So with that, if you'd like to open to the public or if anyone else has anything to say.
Thank you. But before we open to the public, it is now 10 minutes after 10, and we're going to open to the public and we're going to continue on this. We had another application on the agenda, the Anderson application. Jen, do we still have folks from the Anderson application who haven't given up yet?
Yes, they're still here.
All right, do we have counsel?
Yes.
Could we bring counsel forward?
Sure. I'll move him over as a panelist. Mr. Akins. Should be here soon.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Akins. How are you?
Great. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. How are you?
We're great. Mark, it's getting late, and I wanted to I wanted to just touch base with you and see where you're at. I mean, we're obviously running out of time. We usually don't go any later than 11 for sure. It's not clear when we're going to get done with this. Do you have anything that's a December 3rd or bust with your application tonight? Do you have any particular witness here tonight or anything that?
Well, I've got everybody ready to go. I've got Jay Anderson, the architect, and Stephen Krog, the landscape architect, and Jason Fitchter, our planner, is ready, as well as the homeowners. Everybody's been online since about 8 o'clock.
Right. So, Mr. Akins, as a practical matter, there's no way we're going to be able to get through all those witnesses and complete your application tonight. No question about that. Is there anything that's time sensitive that we could perhaps try to do within a limited amount of time tonight as an accommodation to your client?
Well, I'd like to try to get as far as we can. I think the chairman and the board may be aware that the house is under construction pursuant to a zoning permit and building permit of right. And so construction would go one way or perhaps another way, depending upon the board's actions. So we certainly would like to try to make progress.
All right, Mr. Akins, we're going to take that under account.
Thank you.
And we're going to get back to you.
Thank you.
Should I move him back to an attendee?
Yep, please. Okay. We're now going to open this hearing, the Guerra hearing, to the public. So if there are any members of the public that have any questions or would like to make any comments with regard to this application at N8 Hendrickson Place, use your raise the hand feature and Ms. Johnson will bring you up one at a time.
Okay, Mary Williams, I will bring her over. She'll be moving over soon. Ms. Williams, you are on mute, and I've requested to start your video.
We can see you and you're no longer on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Terrific. Mr. Irene?
Williams, could you give us your full name, spell your last, and your address for the record, please?
Yes, it's Mary Williams, Williams, and it's 12 Hendrickson Place.
And we're going to swear you in. Do swear in testimony you give this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and not but truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Williams, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm not very technical. I've been listening for the last hour, and I don't have much to offer about the property sizes and whatnot, but I've been here in my home for 54 years. We purchased the lot next door from the borough. I would guess probably now about maybe 40 years ago. And I absolutely intend to stay here for the rest of my life. I've seen a lot of changes in the 54 years. We were the youngest family that came into the neighborhood, and now I'm the oldest one here, and the neighbors are all young with young children. And it's a beautiful neighborhood, and I feel very, very, very fortunate that Lara and Sean moved in 4 years ago. They have been a remarkable asset to this neighborhood, I believe to this town. They have a lovely, beautiful family. They're raising their children with respect. They're always out there. I live alone. My husband, I'm sure you probably have known him, Mike Williams. He was director of buildings and grounds for the schools here in Fairhaven. And the children are always out there helping me. I tried to reward them in some way, and Sean and Lara absolutely refuse. Their response to me is that this is what we do for neighbors, and we're trying to teach them to respect and to take care of one another. So I am in 100% in favor of them staying. I fear that if this doesn't go through for them, I would, I speak for most of my neighbors, I would not want them to leave here. I think they are a big, big part of Fairhaven, what this town has represented as a small family loving community, and they fit right in. And I will do everything under my power to keep them here. Lara has been helping me through this COVID, shopping for me, checking in on me every day. And I just can't say enough about them. As I said, I don't know. I do know that my property next door, I believe is not compliant also. We would need a variance if I ever needed to sell it or whatnot. But I have no intentions of doing anything, and I'm hoping that I can stay here to the end. But so, as I said, their house personally, and this is personally speaking, does not fit into the neighborhood. When we bought, our home was only, I believe, maybe 600, 700 square feet. So we've added on 2 additions. What they've done here in this neighborhood, they've knocked down all these old homes and built these beautiful homes. And I'm sorry, Sean and Lara, but their house does not fit in. So I'm sorry. But so this would be a real asset to all of us. And I think they're classy people. They would do a fine job in what they do. And so that's my piece. I just would not want them to have to leave here because of the size of their home. It's not, I personally have never felt that it was a livable building. So they've done a great job where they are with what they have, but they definitely do need the space, definitely.
Ms. Williams, let me ask you a technical question. Do you know, I know it was a long time ago, do you know how you own title to that other lot? Do you know that whether it's in the same name or trust or other ownership as the lot that you originally had?
It's in our name. It's I pay 2 taxes. It's separate lots. If that means anything, I don't really understand too much of it, but it's under our name, and I'm full ownership of it, but I do have 2 tax bills.
And being that the borough sold it, Mr. Chairman, the odds are that they would have offered it to either of the neighbors first for the express purpose of trying to get it to merge out, whether or not the deed requires it to be incorporated or not, but that's often the way it's done.
So Ms. Williams, I want to ask just a little more clearly. I think you answered it, but I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. It isn't that one of the lots is owned by you and one is owned by your husband. Yeah. They're both owned by you in your name, no other name. So to the extent that we're talking about this merger issue, then they would be in common ownership, as far as you understand.
As far as I understand, as it stands right now, it's in my husband and my name. Yes.
Both lots.
Yes.
And what is the size of the lot, ma'am, that you did not acquire from the borough, the lot that your house is on? Is that conforming?
I don't know. We bought the house, and what we did was exactly what Sean and Lara is doing. We added on, our first addition was we went back, I believe it was 15 feet. And then our second addition, we went straight up. So
okay. No, it's fine. It was more that we're just trying to flush out the question the chairman was raising about the issue of merger, potential subdivision of the property, and so on and so forth. That's
oh, I see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So Ms. Williams, it's fair to say that you don't have any negative feelings regarding an incursion into the light or the air or the space that would result from this family not complying with the side yard setback on the side that faces your lot.
Absolutely not.
You don't have any problem with that.
Absolutely not.
You have anything further, Ms. Williams?
No, I just really truly hope that they can have this passed. As I said, I can't express it enough that they've been phenomenal neighbors, good human beings. They're raising their children beautifully. I think them going into the school system, like I said, I've seen a lot of changes, and they would just be the best to come into this town. I really believe that. And I know we were forced to make decisions because our house was so small and with 2 children, but we stayed here for the schools. And I know that's what Sean and Lara are doing. And it's for the better of their children. And so I think we're all in accord with it, but I expressed that I wanted to be here tonight because I'm actually the closest attached to them as far as property goes. And I have absolutely no issues at all with it.
When you expanded your house, Ms. Williams, did you get variance relief? Did you
Oh,
need
yes,
variance relief?
yes. My husband did all that, yes.
Again, it would have been helpful maybe if we had those resolutions, just to see.
I do have all the paperwork, but I didn't realize it was.
No, that wasn't addressed to you, ma'am. I'm just in
Oh,
general. As a comment,
okay.
have been helpful for the board to see maybe what relief has been granted around the subject property. That's all.
I just want to clarify, Ms. Williams, that we all want Lara and Sean to stay too. Okay, just so we're all on the same page about that. This isn't about whether or not they stay or not. It's about whether or not what they're proposing is something that that everybody's comfortable with.
I know, I realize that, but as I said, right now their house doesn't really fit into the neighborhood, so it would really make a big difference.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Allowing me to talk.
Any more hands, Jen?
One more hand, Mr. Alshivetti. I'll bring him over as a panelist. Okay.
Mr. Shivetti, we're going to ask you to give us your full name, spell your last, and your address for the record, please.
Alfred John Chiavetti III, SCHIAV like in Victor, ETTI, 853 River Road, Fairhaven.
We're going to swear you in. You do swear in testimony you give this board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make one comment, and that is on a lot of occasions like this, the board asks the applicants if there is any vacant land adjacent to theirs, and if the possibility of purchasing any of that was explored in order to remedy any of the variances that were needed. And from what I've heard of the testimony, there is vacant land adjacent to this, and it's possible that that could cure at least 2 of the variances, certainly the D variance. So I'm just commenting on the fact that that's something that I've heard the board discuss before or asked before, hadn't heard it tonight. And that's the extent of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an interesting question. Just for the benefit of the applicant, there is sort of a concept in the MLUL that the applicant attempt to resolve nonconformity through the acquisition of property. It's a relatively tone-deaf sort of thought in a fully developed town such as ours. But this evening we spent a lot of time talking about this vacant lot and this excess land. I think Mr. Chiavetti's point is a good one. Anything further, Mike, about the nature of that question?
Well, I guess the question would be, I don't know if that, Mr. Chiavetti, was a question or a comment or both, but I guess the question is to Mr. and Mrs. Guerrero, did they explore with their neighbor, and I'm not sure if Ms. Williams is still online, did they explore the possibility of acquiring some of that square footage to make their lot conform and maybe eliminate the HFAR?
I believe I may have posed that question to Jennifer Johnson. Maybe she can chime in. I've gone through every sort of avenue to try to make this work, and I believe my understanding was, let's just say that was a possibility, and I'm not sure that it is. That would require a whole new set of going in front of the planning board as opposed to the zoning board. And I was told that even then, you're not guaranteed to be granted. Let's say I purchased 25 frontage from Mrs. Williams. There's no guarantee that I would then, get an R10 lot. So whereas I was already sort of knee deep in, the zoning board application, and I didn't want to stop this to then pivot and then now go in front of the planning board and spend a lot more time and money, and not to mention, when you're in this town, when you're buying land of that size, that comes at a considerable cost.
Well, that may be true, but I think what the question that the board may or may not be raising is, first, let me say that yes, the subdivision would be required, right? If you're going to buy a piece of a neighbor's property, so that would be true. But the question is whether the hardship, or at least some of the hardship, could be eliminated if there was land available for acquisition. And until the testimony this evening and the issue of this, it sounded like all the adjacent lots were all undersized. So that issue usually would not even come up because none of the neighboring properties would have land to give. But when the issue arose of the vacant lot, and then we spiraled into, is there a merger, is no merger, and Mrs. Williams then came on board, it's the kind of question that a board might ask. Are you able to eliminate the nonconformity in terms of lot area and perhaps habitable floor area by acquiring additional land? If additional land is available for sale, it may not be.
Right.
But the question is, until that question is explored, is the board able to say that, yeah, you've got a hardship that's rooted in an undersized lot?
I want to clarify that these are questions that we ask because of the way the MLUO is set up. They may not always seem like practical answers, practical questions and practical answers, if that's going to cost you $100,000 and it wouldn't make financial sense to do it. But the board applies the rules uniformly. So this month, next month, and the month after that, we'll be asking the same questions because the standards are always the same. We're not allowed to think about how well you're raising your kids and how wonderful your relationship is with your neighbors. We're literally not allowed to take that into account. What we have to take into account is the structure that you're proposing to build, and whether or not, if we grant the variances that you're asking for, we would grant the same variances to somebody else under the similar circumstances. Every application is unique, but we're trying to work through the issues that we always work through because we have a standard to uphold month to month. And even for Hendrickson, right? We did grant deviations on 4 Hendrickson. I think it's interesting to think about what we granted and why, and how that might color our analysis of what you're proposing. Anyway, I do think for the purpose.
But I have the 4 Hendrickson resolution open. You want me to go through it, or is it not?
Well, we're talking about, I think, 12 Hendrickson right now, right? So the question is, is this the kind of situation where if the applicants were represented by counsel would have sent a letter to the neighbor, and I don't know if we still have Ms. Williams on the line or not, saying, do you have any of it? Are you interested in selling any of the property? And in many cases, the neighbor would respond, no, I'm not, and that forecloses that inquiry at that point.
I don't really think it's appropriate to put Mrs. Williams on the spot.
No, I understand that. I don't know that if you want to carry it to give them an opportunity to explore that, I defer to the board.
I think we should get through any other questions or comments from the public, and then I think we should huddle up and talk about where we are. So are there any other members of the public that have any questions or comments with regard to the application? Nothing further, Jack?
Nope.
Okay.
No hands.
So now we're at the point in the hearing where we could ask you to summarize the application, the board could deliberate, and the board could vote and make a decision. At times, what we do at this point is we're presented with a proposal that we carry the application for the applicant to consider the board's input and the discussion if the applicant believes that there's points that have been raised that cause them to want to do something further with regard to the presentation. One of those things might be to have a discussion with Ms. Williams offline about the issue of the property. And just so you understand, if Ms. Williams says that she's not interested in selling, that issue's over. If Ms. Williams said that she was interested in selling, then that backs you into a different situation than what you present to the board tonight. Because what you could do through a proposal to pick up a piece of her property is make your lot either conforming or closer to conforming, and you would be dealing with different deviations from the ordinances than what you're presenting tonight. So it would certainly be material, but the board isn't suggesting that it has any idea what's practical for you or for Ms. Williams. I think the other issue that's before us is that you've heard some, I think, candid discussion about the nature of the proposed renovations. And so I don't know if any other board members have any other comments that they want to share, and I don't know what the applicant would propose to do. Standard course, we'd close the arguments, we'd have our deliberation, and we'd vote.
Chairman, I would just, I haven't spoken yet, yeah, just a couple things. I know Adam made a comment about the 2.3 to the 2.8 to the 2.3. I'm struggling with that ratio. I'm also struggling with the 5 foot on the one side, and I know we spent a little time early on where this kitchen is, and don't want to be designing houses, but I do have concerns around those two things, just to be clear. And I know Dr. Lawford made a comment about other properties, and I'm looking at 1 Hendrickson and the photographs that were, and we always have a conversation about you know, these bulk sizes. And so when I visualize, even though the lot next door is open, you know, I can imagine now this long plane of a home going down this one side. And if I look at the photographs that were supplied, 1 Hendrickson is a good example, even 4, you'll see, I think how, Chairman, you were saying that they hide some of these and scale it. So that's one of these, I don't know, I would say an architectural trick or an architectural thing, but I've seen a lot of the homes that have gone up over the last 10 years, and they seem to all sort of, well, they all look like this now, but I think it's a way for the scale and the size to fit a little, and I'll use that word aesthetically, into these tight lots. So just my 2 cents.
Anyone else who hasn't shared thoughts with regard to how they see this, have any thoughts that they want to share?
I guess the only thing I would say is just this is a very unique situation, right, with the lot next door. But I'm not sure whether we're asking, you know, like too much by almost requiring the applicants to go back and try to buy land next door. Is it just a question of, is that a reasonable request to potentially delay a decision?
So, Lainey, one of the elements of establishing the positive criteria, Mike,
Hardship.
the hardship criteria, is that they were unable to acquire any additional land to make this lot more accommodating of the proposed renovations. So it isn't that we're coming up with it. It's part of what's set forth in the MLUL. If you leave it alone, it doesn't help you either way. But if they present back to us that they were unable, then it's a factor that we can take into consideration in granting a variance.
Because then the issue is that the lot's undersized, there's hardship rooted in the lot. And again, setting aside the HFAR for a moment, just talking about the lot and whatnot. And there is no land available for acquisition that can eliminate or materially mitigate the lot deficiency. Well, right now, that's a question that you don't know. But again, it's up to you how you want to proceed.
Mr. Kinsella, what do you think?
You know, like a lot of the lots in town, this one has some challenges. You know, it's an interesting thought that if there is land available to, you know, kind of rectify some of these issues, size is you know, it's an issue, but you know, as Dr. Laufer mentioned, you know, I spent some time on that street a few weeks ago when this was on the agenda, and you know, what they're proposing isn't going to be you know, radically out of line with what's there. You know, I think you know, I think we need to think about this a little more. One thing that I would like to circle back to, though, mention that there is a concrete pad on the property that hasn't been used. It was a garage at one point or another, and I guess your neighbors are using it as a basketball court at one time.
Yes, but to clarify, there currently is an 8x12 shed that we had. That was one of the first things we did as new homeowners, and you know, having been renters our whole lives, we purchased and put a shed on there. And after talking with Jennifer Johnson through this process, and I mentioned that, she said, okay, you need to rectify that. You need to get a permit for that. So I actually have that ready to go. So I will be, you know, making that right.
No, so there's something on the pad. I was thinking if the pad was empty, not being used, you know, one of the things, and I don't know if we could even ask for this, Mr. Chairman, but you know, remove that pad. But it sounds like there's something there. So my question is moot, I would guess.
Right, it's the shed only occupies maybe about a half of the pad. So, you know, there could be the possibility to remove half of it.
I would like it if we could get rid of some, is, you know, you're gonna expand your house up one way or the other. You know, if we can offset some of that by removing some of this impermeable hardscape, I think it would be better, or something. I would be, you know, happier with that.
Thank you.
I have just one more thought on this, and I know we're not deliberating yet, but I have kind of a question or comment that might be helpful. I think I'm personally struggling less with the hardship aspect here and more with reconciling to the legislative standard that's been set and meeting the D variance. And there's been a lot of commentary, which I agree with, that, you know, a lot of the other homes on the street kind of have this look now, and they look in a sense like they're almost oversized or bigger homes on smaller, narrow lots. And I agree, but I don't think we've seen any evidence really supporting going over the floor area ratio here. And I'm just wondering, you know, if that is truly the case on this street, is there any evidence to kind of back that up? And even, you know, we talked about recently, we looked at 4 Hendrickson Place, anything that might get to that point that Mr. Irene had earlier about the presumption that, you know, the Borough Council knows the existing layout, and there's kind of a presumption that they agree with it unless they change the law. So evidence in that area, I think, might actually be helpful to kind of support the justification for going over. And I'm just wondering if applicants considered that, or if they've made an attempt to obtain any information about neighboring properties aside from photographs.
I just want to be clear on the presumption. So the law tells us that, for instance, and sometimes when someone comes in for a use variance for a two-family dwelling, they'll say, well, there's 2 or 3 other two-family dwellings in the area. They may be pre-existing non-conforming uses. And the law tells us that the governing body is presumed to be aware of those non-conformities. And if they do not change the zoning to make them conform, so if they don't change the zone from single family to two-family, notwithstanding the fact that there are two-family dwellings that exist, the presumption is that the failure to change the zone is intentional, so that the governing body maintains the zoning the way it is, notwithstanding the fact that there may be nonconformities. I just want to be clear on what the presumption is supposed to be.
That's helpful, I guess. So if there were, Mike, just kind of playing that out, if there were other homes that were above the floor area ratio in the neighborhood or the area that had been approved, would that help at all here?
Well, it depends, because again, if they're pre-existing non-conforming, right?
We don't
then
have
you have that presumption.
Yeah.
And to the extent that the board may have granted relief in those cases, then they're not pre-existing non-conforming. The board affirmatively granted relief. You have the principle that every application rises and falls on its own merits. But an applicant would say, to the extent that we can prove the positive criteria, we want to argue to you that we satisfy the negative criteria because what we're proposing would not be inconsistent with what's in the neighborhood now. So that's kind of the way it works.
Thank you.
I just want to make the point that even if we find out, and Mr. Nashesny has the reso, so I think we should actually go through it. Even if we were to find out on 4 Hendrickson that we granted a floor area ratio variance, it's really all about the various components that get you there.
Yeah.
What continues to make me uncomfortable about this is not as much the size, because I see this as a 2,100 square foot existing footprint plus an addition in the back. It really isn't that in total, although I certainly recognize that it's way over. It's more the inability to soften the front yard problems and the side yard problems to the extent that we are adding to the existing structure. 21 feet and 32 feet are completely different. And the length of this house, it's not just 15 extra feet. It's everything up to that height and then all the way back. It's more than 50% of additional, structure going down that side. So anyways, the point is, you got to look at each one. Peter, what did we do on 4 Hendrickson? Just since
we granted two sets of relief. We granted, it was we granted a FAR. The 28% was allowed. We granted a FAR of 34%, and we granted both variances of both single side and combined side yard setbacks. 7 feet. And 7 feet versus 10 on the single side, and 18.6 versus 24 on the combined.
Which sounds like the R75 zone.
Well, I think in the narrative here on the brief, it says that because, and this is the only difference here, is that 4 Hendrickson is immediately adjacent to R5 zone on Fairhaven Road. I think that's the one that where the back lot lines from Fairhaven Road hit 4 Hendrickson on the side. And they were, and we make reference to the R5 zone in the variance. The bigger point is that, and to my point is that their FAR was 34%, which would have been under the 35 that we're looking at here.
And what was the total square footage?
Yeah, how big is it?
20, it's lower than this. It's 20, hang on one second. 2533.
Sounds like a pretty detailed resolution we had there.
Extremely. The writer is amazing.
Is that the old attorney? Who's that?
Sorry?
It must be the new attorney because it was more than a page and a half long.
That new attorney's been here an awful long time.
But the point is that we run into this same problem on Hendrickson all the time, and this is not the first time it's happened. And this is the one that I remember. This is from 2019. But I'm sure there was another one prior to this as well on Hendrickson.
maybe what I don't know if other members remember, but this is one also that faces the backyard of the neighbor. The neighbor on Fairhaven Road has a long backyard. And that house before Hendrickson, in the side that is closest to the neighbor, I think the 7 feet, right?
Yeah, I don't know which side that 7 feet is though, Mrs. Neff.
Yeah, essentially where the constraint was on the side where they have the long backyard of the neighbor on Fairhaven Road. And
That's the short
there was a
side?
garage there. There's kind of like a detached garage. So it was also a situation that it was overbearing, not towards a house, but towards a garage / backyard area. I think here, personally, I wonder whether it's worth pursuing more information about the lot next door, to the degree that if it were never to be built, maybe that's different than if there was to be a house there 10 years from now, and then you have this home 5 feet away from a lot that is built. So I kind of feel maybe differently about it. If the lot next door truly is not buildable, it really is a side yard or a backyard, if you will. And I don't know if that makes a difference for others.
I'm sure it's not a conforming R10 lot, but you still could build on it, I suppose. You just have to build something small.
No, the problem is that somebody, and let's say it's not Ms. Williams, but it's somebody else 30 years from now, they basically come in and argue that the 50-foot lot was originally a lot, that while it's merged, it was a lot before, that it's consistent with, the Guerrero's lot and the 4 lots to the east of them, and that they should be permitted the subdivision. We just had one at the other end of Hendrickson, I believe, where they had a 120-foot lot and they wanted to split off a 50. And the argument was that there's 50s all up and down the street. Why can't we do it?
And the street's miszoned, and that's makes a case to rezone the street.
The point is simply that owner who had 120 feet thought they had a good enough shot to invest in the potential to subdivide it. You can't, unless it's deed restricted, which Mike doesn't like this evening. You can never really know that it isn't going to be subdivided.
No, I'm not saying that you can't subdivide it, but whatever construction would go on, there would be new construction, and then would be subject to proper setbacks or come before this board again. And then, it's not, I have a hardship because the house is existing here 5 feet away from the line, and I just want to build up on it, and I can't move the whole house over. New construction is new construction. You can put it wherever it fit,
Yeah, but the issue remains the strength of an argument that pins on hardship because of an undersized lot, not only for the bulk variances, but the hardship that the undersized lot derivatively creates with regard to the floor area ratio, if one hasn't explored whether that hardship can be eliminated by the acquisition of adjacent vacant property. And that doesn't mean the whole lot. It may mean enough to mitigate the deviation, which may not only cure the lot area deficiency, it may mitigate the habitable floor area ratio to some degree.
I agree. That base should be covered,
question.
and we never have it come up because there's never a vacant lot next to a house. This is a unique situation for Fairhaven, so.
And even if it's not a separate vacant lot, apparently the 2 lots together are going to exceed the lot area requirement. We don't know because we don't know the size of the entire tract next door. If it doesn't exceed the lot area requirement, then one could say there's no land to give. But if it does, it's a legitimate question for the board to consider.
I have a tax map, but I'd have to excuse myself to go and dig it up.
These are the kinds of things, and this is no reflection on the applicant, but if there was counsel would have probably sent a letter to the neighbor saying, are you amenable to selling any of your property? We believe you have excess. I'm going to assume that for the moment, and we're looking at acquiring X feet. And then the neighbor writes back and says, I'm not interested in selling, go away. And that's the end of it. Or the neighbor says, yes, I am. Let's talk. And then the board is going to sort of wait to see. Now, if the neighbor says, I want $3 million for a 10-foot strip, the board may say that's unreasonable. You don't have to do that. But the problem is we don't know. we just don't know. We don't have any answer to that because it wasn't done. The other problem is because these cases are kind of difficult, as you can see by the way you're struggling with the deviations, particularly the D for the FAR. It's always helpful to have planning testimony, and we don't have that. Just a comment. It makes the board's job that much more difficult.
I just want to clarify one thing. If in fact the two combined lots is beyond the minimum, okay, and the planning board is presented with a proposal to take a piece of the lot off, the excess, and annex it to an adjacent non-conforming lot, there would be a presumption of regularity of doing that. I'm not saying the planning board has to do anything, but at the end of the day, the idea of getting that line reset is not the same thing as trying to subdivide off some non-conforming, or it doesn't have the same type of hurdle to it.
Exactly right. There would be essentially a presumption in favor of trying to make the lots conform or more conforming.
So the two issues, if I could, just for a sec, that we seem to be going around with is the possibility of acquiring a certain number of feet from Mrs. Williams or not, as that case may be, because that would help the applicants get out of some hot water with their proposed plan. Or in the alternative, there seems to be some perhaps consensus over trying to fit it into the closer to the 7.5 standards.
Let's get back to the second point. Yeah. But with regard to the first point, we've probably spent more time on this than is warranted, but I'll give an explanation for why we're doing that in a second. If you were to grab, say, 10 feet, okay, you now don't have a 5-foot setback, you got 15 on that side, and your floor area ratio is going to change substantially because you're going to get it for the length of the 147. So you're adding 1,470 square feet. So all those numbers change dramatically, and everything looks different. If you get 25, now you're conforming from 50 to 75, but that's a lot. But the point is, anything that they would be able to get would change the issue that you're looking at on the west lot line. All right, let's put that issue to the side. Again, if they presented a letter that said the neighbor didn't want to sell it, they've established for the purpose of the hardship that they were unable to do it. It helps them if they can answer the question. All right, we don't buy property for people or design houses. On the other issue, and I want to bring this back to the applicant, what you've heard, I think, through all of this is a sincere effort by a lot of people that are your neighbors that really care to try and help you through this process, because there is not a, Mr. Mark Akins who's chomping at the bit to get on, sort of walking you through what's possible and making the arguments for you. So we're trying to work with you so you can understand kind of what we're thinking. As you poll what the board members have said, you need a majority of the board, 4 out of 7, to get your C variances. Those are your side yard setbacks and your front yard setbacks, not your pre-existing nonconformities. You're okay to the extent that you have structure in place, but to the extent that you're exacerbating either laterally or horizontally, you need a variance in each case. You need a majority of the board there. With regard to the floor area ratio, as your total square footage, you need 5 of 7. So in order for us to go to a vote, you need to feel comfortable that that's where you are. Alternatively, you have an opportunity to work with Mr. Grammer, to talk about what you've heard tonight, to talk to your neighbor, to maybe talk to an attorney, to come back with perhaps more legal arguments as to why you are where you are, or perhaps after looking at it and thinking about what the comments that you've gotten, maybe looking at some of the other houses and what they've gotten approved, to try to model your design after some of those solutions. I'm not telling you what to do. I can't do that. We're genuinely trying to help you. But we're at the point in the evening where we have to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to, vote, or whether or not you're going to ask us to continue it and, come back after an opportunity to consult with some others.
Yeah, all right. I think at this point, we asked to carry it because there are obviously some unanswered questions. And obviously the 0.38 is a real sticking point. And I think we've got to chip away at that. what I guess I would like to know, before we wrap up is what number would make everybody happy, or at least 5 of the 7 happy? Like what ratio would really, seal the deal? So
I'm not even going to let Mike jump in. I'm going to that we can't do that. We can't negotiate with you. What needs to happen is we need to support the criteria that the law requires that we observe as we evaluate those decisions. From your neighbors' resolutions, you know what we've done in past cases. And because I've promised you that it's true, we consider their application the same way we're considering yours. So you have the benefit of seeing what they've done. And where they deviate, you can take a look at their design and try and figure out how they made it fit in. But your lot situation is different. Lilini was correct in remembering that where they're short, they backed up on somebody's backyard, where there wasn't a concern that it was going to impose on air, light, and open space in the same way that there's been some concern about you on the one side. You've also heard us explain the way we look at the R5, the 7.5, and the R10 standards across the board. And so you know that you can come back and help us understand how your design attempts to meet a standard that's been established by council. And you can back into an argument that it would be unreasonable for us to deny you because fill in the blank.
And if land is available for acquisition and can be reasonably acquired, then the whole issue of can you conform to the FAR pops up. Because if you can acquire the land sufficient to have a conforming lot area, then wouldn't you be able to conform to the FAR? So the issue of, well, then we can't conform to the FAR kind of becomes much more difficult if there is land available for reasonable acquisition. And I don't know if there is, but there's land there. The question is it available?
I'm sorry that we can't give you a target and what people would like to be able to say okay to. Do you want to request that we carry your application to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's a couple answers I need to seek out. So yes, I would like that very much.
So the board has a limited amount of time to act on your application. So as a condition of agreeing to give you the additional time to proceed, we would ask you to stipulate for additional time for our deadlines to take action on your application.
Okay. Okay. Assuming that's amenable to Mr. Grammer and.
Mr. Grammer, you got any objection to that?
I do not.
Okay. So I'll make the motion to carry the Guerrero application with no obligation to renotice, conditioned on their stipulation of extension of time to act.
To the January 7, 2021 meeting, Jen?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Mr. and Ms. Guerrero, the January meetings are a reorganization meeting. The board has a lot of matters that are sort of in the hopper waiting to go. What I would ask is that you communicate with Ms. Johnson as to where you are. We'll carry you to January. But if you know before January that you won't be ready, I would ask that you let us know. We have an applicant behind you now, and we work very hard to make sure that we hear people as quickly as we can. So we'll put you on for January, but just be sure to let us know where you're at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll do a roll call January 7, 2021 without the necessity of renotice. And we have a stipulation from the applicant extending time which board has to act.
Chesney,
Yes.
Ms. Quigley,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgway,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Ludman,
Yes.
Dr. Laufer,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
So any interested parties on the Guerrero application, the matter is being carried to January 7, 2021 without the necessity of renotice. Please mark your calendar accordingly. There'll be no further notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, board, you heard from Mr. Akins. He would really like to get something done tonight. I am willing to.
But Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that in view of the hour, that they're probably going to ask to have it carry. You may want to bring him up.
Okay. Mr. Akins?
No.
You're on mute, Mark.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We were ready to go. We've got 3 witnesses. I don't know how much sense it makes to start at 11 o'clock. I know your board's been going for close to 4 hours, so.
Mr. Akins, we do the best we possibly can to accommodate the applicants.
Yeah. Is there any chance, last month we had, an issue that was raised by the board engineer the day before the hearing. We've resolved that. We renoticed. We were ready to go. We've got 3 professionals, myself, the homeowners who are parents of a young family. Is there any chance we could be moved first to the January 7th date, Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Johnson, what do we have on for January 7th?
Just the Gallardo now. There was another application that was deemed complete recently.
But they're not scheduled for January?
No.
Mr. Akins, you can be right behind the Guerreros if they come in, or you can be ahead of them if they decide that they're not ready in January.
Okay, the only thing I would ask is if the Guerreros don't have counsel or don't have, a team to move the matter as efficiently, perhaps as we are prepared to move it, that the chair and the board give that due consideration.
We'll give it consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And no further notice, we'd stipulate to the time for decision being extended as well, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I should indicate that Mr. Akins re-noticed for tonight. I've reviewed the notice materials. They appear to be in order. My recommendation is the board has jurisdiction to hear and consider the matter.
Okay, I'll make the motion to carry the Anderson matter to the January 7th meeting, acknowledging the applicant's stipulation of the board's time to act.
Second.
Chesney?
Yes.
Ms. Quigley?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgway?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Ludman?
Yes.
Dr. Laufer?
Yes.
Mr. Leader?
Yes.
So
Thanks,
we'll indicate for the record, Mr. Chairman, that the Anderson matter is carried to January 7, 2021 without the necessity of renotice. We have a stipulation from council. So any interested parties, please mark your calendar accordingly. There'll be no further notice.
I'll send a confirming letter, Mr. Irene and Ms. Johnson. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Mr. Akins, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Can we get through a few of these administrative items? We're not going to go
Yeah,
long.
there's only two things to go. One is the minutes from the November 12th meeting. Having reviewed the minutes, I may have no changes. Does anybody have any changes to make on November 12th? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 12th meeting.
Second.
Chesney?
Yes.
Ms. Quigley?
Yes.
Mr. Ridgway?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Ludman?
Yes.
Dr. Laufer?
Yes.
Mr. Leader?
And lastly, the thing we all love, the excellently written zoning board 2019 annual report. I want to thank Pat and everybody that was involved in this. It was a really great effort this year. Has everybody had a chance to review the draft that Jennifer sent around? Any comments, changes, notifications? I think it reads really well. I like the commentary at the end very much. Anybody?
I think it's very good. I just noticed one formatting issue looking at it again. There's a paragraph that's indented. The second paragraph's indented too far. Otherwise, you've looked at this enough. Everything looks great.
You want to carry it to February?
I would like.
I'm fine as is.
I would like to say that I really hope we decide to create a committee in the new year instead of just discussing the creation of a committee in the new year. But that's all I'm going to say.
That's the way, that's the timeline, Pat. 5 years from now, we'll be talking about it.
That's it.
So,
Yeah,
just so everybody knows, you know, there was just an election. There's a lot of talk. There's people have reached out to me. There is energy to take a look at stuff. The real question is not whether we're going to set up a committee. The real question is who's going to be on it. So, you know, let's think about that, and you know, let's do it. Let's be the motivator. Let's get these discussions going. I thought that the summary of what we wanted to do is hard for anybody to say wouldn't be great. So let's be the motivators. Let's make it happen.
Great.
So it's going to be adopted by resolution. I also sent around the little form resolution that serves as a cover. So if the board wants to adopt the resolution, adopting the annual report subject to that one margin correction that Mr. Ludman referenced, does someone want to make that motion?
I'll move that. So move.
Second.
Chesney,
Yes.
Ms. Quigley,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgway,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Ludman,
Yes.
Dr. Laufer,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes, on the basis that Lalini is actually going to be the person that's going to carry these messages to council with her in January. Congratulations one last time, Ms. Neff.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. And I really look forward to continuing these discussions. I think there is room for us to work together. So Pat, please push everyone to bring these issues to the council.
Okay.
So Jen, you'll just complete that resolution in terms of the date and the members who voted, and then pass it all on to the governing body and the planning board, please.
Sure, yes, no problem.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Geez. There are 15 people in the audience still, or that includes us. Is there anybody in the audience that just thought we would possibly give you a chance to speak at 11:08? If so, raise your hand.
No hands.
All right, you know I am serious. I'm not really, I wouldn't be angry if you had a comment. All right. Long meeting, everybody. Thanks a lot for hanging in there. It isn't easy sometimes, but it's important.
Very happy holiday and a safe and healthy new year to everyone.
Likewise.
Same.
Holidays,
Your
everybody.
leadership, Todd.
Good night.
Good job, everyone.
Take care,
Yep.
guys.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Good night. Be well.
Down.